Chapter 2007. Looking at Qin Feiyang arguing with Shangguan Fenglan, Hui couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. How could this person be so bold? The enforcement hall master was a core figure of Nine Heavens Palace. Which disciple of Nine Heavens Palace didn't respect her like a god? But this guy not only repeatedly threatened her, but also refused to back down. If the other disciples were to see this, their jaws would probably drop in shock. Brother Jiang, stop arguing. Hui hurriedly interrupted Qin Feiyang. If they continued arguing like this, they would really anger this woman. Brother Jiang, hall master, how about this? We each take a step back. 50 million soul stones first. 50 million soul stones. For you, hall master. You won't suffer a loss or be cheated. And we won't run away from Nine Heavens Palace for a mere 50 million soul stones. As for the rest, we'll pay you in installments. Hui said. How do we do it in installments? Shangguan Fenglan frowned. Every time we kill someone, you'll give us some. For example, Feng Wenhai. If we kill him in the future, you'll pay us 100 million soul stones. Hui said. Based on the number of people, this idea is not bad. Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Hui looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Brother Jiang, what do you think? Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and nodded. I have no objection. Isn't this a happy ending? Hui smiled. But words are no proof. Let's write it down. Qin Feiyang said again. Shangguan Fenglan was stunned and immediately said angrily, You're doubting this hall master's character. Hall master, please calm down. Although Brother Jiang's method is wrong, it's pardonable. After all, you're not an ordinary person. If you really go back on your word, then we can only watch helplessly. Hui smiled flatteringly. Fine. As you wish. Shangguan Fenglan glared at the two of them, and said in a deep voice. Hui immediately took out a brush, ink, paper and inkstone. Qin Feiyang scribbled furiously and wrote everything on the paper. Then he pressed a thumbprint on the paper and looked at Shangguan Fenglan. Palace master, please. Shangguan Fenglan was about to go crazy. He was actually playing such a childish game with two immature brats? It was simply embarrassing. She cut her thumb, gritted her teeth, and pressed a fingerprint on it. Hui smiled. It's finally over. Qin Feiyang was also beaming from ear to ear. He carefully put away the receipt, then extended his hand and said with a smile, Lord Hall Master, 50 million soul stones. Wait here. Shangguan Fenglan snorted coldly and turned to enter the attic. Hui laughed mischievously and said, Brother Jiang, we've made a killing this time. I did get the soul stone, but Feng Yuan and the others aren't that easy to deal with. Qin Feiyang sighed. Hui meaningfully said, I think that with Brother Jiang's methods, it shouldn't be too difficult. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, From what you said, you're planning to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. No. Since I've taken the soul stone, then I must contribute. However, I also know that I'm not that capable, so Brother Jiang is still the one who comes up with the plan. I can only assist from the side. Hui laughed. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. Soon, Shangguan Fenglan came out and threw a qianquan bag to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang glanced at it and kept it. Shangguan Fenglan said, Aren't you going to be more careful? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I still believe in the palace master's character. Don't say such high-sounding words. I've already given you 50 million soul stones. I hope to see results as soon as possible. Shangguan Fenglan said with a cold face. Don't worry. Very soon, the palace master will know that the 400 million soul stones and the god art will not be spent in vain. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Hui. Brother Hui, let's go. You go first, I'll be right there. Hui responded, looked at Shangguan Fenglan, and smiled like a gentleman. Miss, are you free tonight? Shall we go and have a seat? Scram. Shangguan Fenglan's face darkened as she shouted angrily. I'm sincerely inviting you. And I don't have any ulterior motives. I just want to communicate more. Hui licked his face and said shamelessly. But before he could finish, Qin Feiyang angrily dragged him into the Black Tortoise realm and rushed out of the sect like lightning. That's enough. Shangguan Fenglan was about to explode with anger. One openly threatened her, The other unscrupulously teased her, and they were both outer sect disciples. She was a big shot of the Nine Heavens Palace. When had she ever encountered such an encounter? It's best if it can be of some use. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. 50 million soul stones. I don't even dare to dream about it. Black Tortoise Realm. Qin Feiyang sized up the universe bag, his face full of excitement. To break through to the initial stage of the false god realm, one needed 1,000 soul stones. From initial to small success, one needed 10,000. From small success to large success, 100,000. From large success to perfection, 1 million. From perfection to perfection, one needed 10 million soul stones. In other words, these 50 million soul stones were enough to accumulate 5 perfection war gods in a short period of time. This was a true overnight millionaire. Nie Yun and the other soul stones were nothing. No. Huoyi still had a portion. Other than Huoyi's portion, there seemed to be only 30 million left. Wait. This guy, why isn't there any reaction at all? Qin Feiyang turned to look at Huoyi, only to see him standing at the side with his head lowered. No one knew what he was thinking, but he was giggling nonstop. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He patted Huoyi and said, "What are you thinking about? What are you doing? You scared me." Huoyi glared at Qin Feiyang angrily. "You were too engrossed in your thoughts. Tell me, are you thinking about Shangguan Fenglan?" Qin Feiyang asked curiously. "Isn't that nonsense? Could it be that I'm thinking about you?" Huoyi rolled his eyes at him. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "Why are you so stubborn? This woman, you really can't afford to offend her." "I'm only interested in women that I can't afford to offend." Huoyi chuckled. "You really won't turn back until you hit the wall. How about this? I'll help you," Qin Feiyang said. "Really?" Huoyi's eyes lit up. "Of course, us brothers. Would we lie to you? But if I help you, you have to repay me. You don't need these soul stones and divine arts." Qin Feiyang laughed. Huoyi was stunned. He immediately rolled his eyes and said, "I knew you didn't feel at ease. Let me tell you, don't play dumb with me. This time, not a single soul stone less. Let me calculate, 50 million soul stones. For people equally. 1 for 1. 1 for 2. I've calculated, each of us will get 12. 5 million soul stones. This is just enough for me to break through from the advanced god of war to the peak. Give it to me." Huoyi stretched out his hand, looked at Qin Feiyang and chuckled. Did he really think he was a fool? Such a large amount of soul stones, he didn't even dare to think about it before. Now that it was in front of him, how could he not want it? "Let me tell you, you're so stingy, you'll never get Shangguan Fenglan." Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. "This is 2 different things. It's irrelevant. Don't talk nonsense. If you want to take it all for yourself, I'm not done with you," Huoyi said. All right, who wants to take it all for himself? Don't think that I'm as shameless as you, okay?" Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and carefully counted out 12. 5 million soul stones, not one more, not one less, and threw it to Huoyi. In other words, right now he only had 37. 5 million left. However, he should be satisfied. This amount of soul stones, if placed on an outer court disciple, he would not be able to earn so much in his lifetime. Half an hour later, Qin Feiyang and Huoyi finally returned to the outer court cave. But as soon as they entered the cave, Qin Feiyang and Huoyi were stunned. Fire Lotus was sitting on a stool in a daze. Her face was stained with blood and her body was also somewhat dirty. She didn't even notice Qin Feiyang and Huoyi entering the cave. "What's going on?" Qin Feiyang glanced at the cave. When he saw the broken mask on the ground, his entire body was filled with killing intent. He walked in front of Fire Lotus and asked in a deep voice, "Who did this?" "Brother." As soon as Fire Lotus heard Qin Feiyang's voice, she immediately shed tears of grievance. "Who is it? Tell me. I'll go kill him right now." Qin Feiyang shouted, his heart aching. However, he didn't notice that Huoyi, who was behind him, had been staring at Fire Lotus's face the entire time, his eyes flashing with a bright light. "It's a person called Shirtai. He's an inner disciple, a half-step divine lord." At that time, After you and big brother Huai left, he came looking for me. Originally, I was very polite, but he had an overbearing attitude, so I didn't want to bother with him. But because of this, it seemed to have angered him. He directly barged into the cave, slapped me, and even stepped on my head. As Fire Lotus spoke, she threw herself into Qin Feiyang's embrace and said, "Brother, believe me, it's really not my fault. He was the one who was rude first. I didn't cause any trouble for you." Shirtai. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with an astonishingly sharp light and laughed. "Silly girl, of course I believe you. Don't cry, I'm here." "There's a letter on the table?" Huai suddenly noticed that there was an envelope on the coffee table. "That was left behind by Shirtai," Fire Lotus said. Huai opened the envelope and took out the letter inside. On it, there were 7 words written with a murderous aura. "Tomorrow morning, see you on the battlefield." Battlefield. Huai frowned and handed the letter to Qin Feiyang, saying, "This is a letter of challenge. This Shirtai invites you to enter the battlefield to fight." Qin Feiyang glanced at the letter and asked, "Where is the battlefield?" "Between the inner and outer sect. To enter the battlefield, one needs to pass through a fixed transmission altar. It is said that this battlefield is formed by a spatial divine object. It is hidden in the void and is very large inside. It doesn't matter how you attack." Huai said. "Spatial divine object." Fire Lotus was shocked and said, "Qin Dage, let's forget about this matter." "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Since it is formed by a spatial divine object, then the big shots of 9 Heaven Palace will definitely be able to observe the situation inside. What if your purple gold dragon blood is exposed when you fight with Shirtai?" Fire Lotus said worriedly. "What about you? What should I do about this?" Qin Feiyang asked, his heart moved. What a considerate woman. "I'm fine. As long as Qin Dage is fine." Fire Lotus thought. What a silly girl. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, "Don't worry, a mere half-step divine lord doesn't have the ability to expose my identity." Literature Museum. Chapter 2008. He even dares to bully my little sister. He's simply courting death. There must be a conclusion to this matter. I will immediately investigate Shirtai's background, Huai said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned. He looked at Huai and said, "When did Fire Lotus become your little sister? Do we still need to distinguish between each other? She's your little sister, isn't that the same as my little sister? Besides, Fire Lotus calls me Big Brother Huai. As a man, how can I let her be wronged?" Huai said angrily. Fire Lotus was moved and said, "Thank you, Big Brother Huai. We're all family, don't be so polite." Huai smiled and looked at Qin Feiyang. "I will go investigate now, wait for my news." Qin Feiyang nodded. Huai turned around and walked a few steps, but suddenly turned to Fire Lotus and said with a grin, "Sister, you should continue to wear a mask in the future." "Why?" Fire Lotus was stunned and looked at Huai suspiciously. "Because you're too beautiful. If those disciples outside saw you, wouldn't they come looking for you every day? I believe you wouldn't like having a bunch of flies following you around all day." Huai chuckled. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Fire Lotus said angrily, her cheeks flushed red. After Huai left the cave, Qin Feiyang wiped the blood on Fire Lotus's face and said with a smile, "Go wash up in the Black Tortoise world and relax." Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the Red Lotus instantly disappeared. "Shirtai, I want to see who gave you the courage to hit my people," Qin Feiyang muttered. A cold light flashed in his eyes and he followed Huai into the castle. "Fire Lotus, are you alright?" Mermaid Princess' voice suddenly sounded. Qin Feiyang was stunned and turned to Mermaid Princess. He saw the Mermaid Princess sitting cross-legged on the ground and looking at Qin Feiyang with concern. "She's fine." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and took out the Qianquan bag. He smiled and said, "These soul stones should be enough for you to cultivate for a while." Everyone opened their eyes and looked at the Qianquan bag with joy. Tantai Li's gaze turned to Qin Feiyang and said, "Feiyang, you to cultivate. Look at your cultivation. You've been in the ancient world for so long, but you've made no progress, at most half a month." Qin Feiyang said, "Okay, I'll start cultivating now." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile. He didn't know how long it would take to refine a soul stone now. He remembered that it used to take half an hour to refine one. After taking out a soul stone and putting the Qiankuan bag on the altar, Qin Feiyang sat cross-legged on the ground and started to refine it silently. Inside the castle, time flew by. About half an hour later, the soul stone in his hand was finally refined. The time has been shortened by half. Qin Feiyang was stunned. In other words, now he could refine 4 soul stones in 2 hours. 48 soul stones in 24 hours a day. It took 100,000 divine gems to break through to the advanced divine gems. 100,000 divided by 48 was more than 2,080 days. About 5.5 years. What? 5.5 years? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. He didn't know this, but he was shocked when he calculated. It took more than 5 years to refine 100,000 soul stones. He was really lucky to have the castle. Otherwise, it would take him a whole 5 to 6 years just to refine these soul stones. The castle's time rule was that 1 day outside was 1 year inside. In other words, now he only needed 5 to 6 days to refine 100,000 soul stones and step into the advanced divine gems. Compared to others, this really saved a lot of time. Late at night, above the 9th heaven palace, a waning moon emitted a weak light. A black shadow quietly came to the sword peak and gently knocked on the tightly shut stone door. The next moment, the stone door opened. Qin Feiyang stood inside the door and looked at the black shadow with a smile. Come in. After the black shadow entered, Qin Feiyang closed the stone door, turned around and waved his hand. A flame appeared, illuminating the entire cave. And the person standing in front of him was Gao Xiaolong. Of course, before Gao Xiaolong came, he had sent a message to Qin Feiyang in advance, so Qin Feiyang was able to open the door in time without any accident. Gao Xiaolong took out 2 jade boxes from his chest and handed them to Qin Feiyang, smiling. This is what senior brother Feng asked me to give you. 2 jade boxes. One was the size of a palm, square in shape. The other one was a rectangular jade box that was a foot long. Qin Feiyang first grabbed the square jade box and opened the lid. A black fruit appeared in front of him. This fruit was only the size of a baby's fist, exuding a trace of black fog, filled with an evil aura. That's right. This was the death god fruit. After closing the lid of the box, Qin Feiyang took the long jade box and opened it to take a look. Surprisingly, there was a tree branch that was half a foot long lying inside. This branch was perfectly round, similar to a straight chopstick. It was pitch black with yin energy swirling around it. In a trance, one could even hear ghostly laughter coming from the yin energy. Yin Soulwood. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. This young master Feng was indeed amazing. He got his hands on the death god fruit, and yin Soulwood so quickly. Gao Xiaolong said. Young Master Feng also said that although he can't help you with things like soul stones, he can provide you with some herbs. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to look for him. Qin Feiyang closed the jade box and smiled. Thank him for me. Also, I heard during the day that Shirtai issued a challenge to you? Gao Xiaolong asked. Qin Feiyang nodded. This Shirtai. Gao Xiaolong was about to say something. Bang. The cave stone door was kicked open and Hui stormed in angrily. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang looked suspiciously at Hui. Isn't it because, before Hui could finish his words, he saw Gao Xiaolong and asked suspiciously, he is? Qin Feiyang said. He's called Gao Xiaolong, one of us. Hui nodded and said angrily. You don't know this Shirtai is actually Feng Zijuan's man. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned to look at Gao Xiaolong and asked, is that so? This Shirtai can be considered Feng Zijuan's confidant. He usually follows behind Feng Zijuan like a dog. This time he issued a challenge to you 100%. It was ordered by Feng Zijuan. Gao Xiaolong said. Not only that, after Shirtai issued the challenge, he spread the news everywhere, cutting off your escape route. Because now everyone knows about it. If you don't show up tomorrow, there will be people talking behind your back. Hui said. That's right. Moreover, he spread the news everywhere to embarrass you in front of everyone tomorrow. Gao Xiaolong added. So, It was ordered by Feng Zijuan. What did I say? After knowing that I entered the Nine Heavens Palace, you will definitely make a move. Qin Feiyang laughed. Brother Jiang, why do you look like you're looking forward to it? Hua Yi was surprised. This was my plan all along. However, their arrogance exceeded my expectations. They actually dared to harm the Fire Lotus. This debt, I will make them pay double tomorrow. Qin Feiyang sneered. Plan, Hua Yi muttered. This guy was becoming more and more unfathomable, secretly laying out such a trap. This time, Feng Zijuan was probably going to suffer a big setback. Qin Feiyang looked at Gao Xiaolong and said, You go back, tell young noble Feng to prepare to watch the show. Okay. Gao Xiaolong nodded, turned around and teleported, disappearing in a flash. Qin Feiyang's gaze turned to Hua Yi, asking, Why did you take so long to gather information? You're not familiar with this place. Do you think it's easy to gather information? Hua Yi rolled his eyes at him. Qin Feiyang said meaningfully, With your brain, it shouldn't be difficult. Hua Yi smiled embarrassedly, saying, I went to inquire about Shangguan Fenglan's situation. I knew it. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Hua Yi glanced outside the cultivation dwelling and said mysteriously, You don't say. There's something you'll never guess. What is it? Qin Feiyang looked at him curiously. Hua Yi said, This Shangguan Fenglan is the sister of the Treasure Pavilion's Shangguan Qiao. What? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. This was something he really didn't expect. I was still thinking that Shangguan Fenglan could get her hands on 400 million soul stones, so she has such a sister. But this Shangguan Qiao is really not simple. Master is the Treasure Pavilion's chief pavilion master. Her sister is the hall master of the Law Enforcement Hall. No wonder she didn't even take Feng Zijuan seriously back then. Hua Yi sighed. The two sisters. Then I think Shangguan Qiao is more suitable for you than Shangguan Fenglan. Qin Feiyang teased. What are you talking about? Am I the kind of person who plays around? Hua Yi angrily glared at Qin Feiyang, but then he rolled his eyes and changed the topic. He laughed mischievously and said, However, if I can get both of these sisters, then I'll be able to hold my head high for the rest of my life. In the future, I'll be able to walk with my back straight. Qin Feiyang was stunned and kicked him without hesitation, saying angrily, Get out of my sight as far as you can, and don't appear in front of me again. You're jealous. Hua Yi hurriedly dodged, and then raised his middle finger. He scorned Qin Feiyang, and then disappeared like a wisp of smoke. You want to get the sisters, and you say you're not a playboy? I've really never seen such a shameless person. Qin Feiyang shook his head. However, now the relationship seemed to have become a little complicated. Shangguan Qiao cooperated with Mu Tianyang. He cooperated with Shangguan Fenglan, and he and Mu Tianyang were life and death enemies. She was almost unable to make sense of it. Headache. Rubbing his forehead, Qin Feiyang closed the stone door of the cave residence, entered the ancient castle, and continued to refine the soul stones. Chapter 2009. Between the inner and outer gates, there was a wide river that meandered from north to south. There was a huge square above the river. In the middle of the square, there were 10 altars. On each altar, there was a number. Battlefield number 1. Battlefield number 2. And finally, battlefield number 10. That's right. This was the entrance to the battlefield. Early in the morning, people came to the square one after another. There are a lot of people here today. A mere outer disciple is so popular? Brother, that's not right. Everyone is here to watch the show. Don't you think this Jiang Haoyan is too daring? He even dares to offend Feng Zijuan? He's courting his own death. Before Jiang Haoyan entered Empyrean Palace, as long as he hid, Feng Zijuan couldn't do anything to him. Now that he has entered Empyrean Palace, how can Feng Zijuan deal with him? Isn't it as easy as killing a chicken? That's right. It's said that a newborn calf isn't afraid of a tiger. Now it seems that it's not without reason. He even dares to accept Shirtai's challenge. Shirtai is a half-step divine lord. I heard that he has a perfect divine technique and a perfect support divine technique. He even has a supreme grade divine artifact. How can an outer sect disciple defeat him? Everyone was discussing. When the sun rose, there were already tens of thousands of people gathered in the square. Most of them were outer disciples. The square could hold 50 to 60,000 people. It was very big. Move, move. Suddenly, a slightly arrogant laugh sounded. Fatso, who was wearing a golden coat, had all kinds of golden rings on his hands and a thick golden chain around his neck. Behind him were 2 followers. He looked like a local tycoon as he swaggered into the square. Brother Fatty, you're here. Brother Fatty, the same old rules? Seeing Fatso arrive, everyone was a little afraid and a little expectant. Of course. Fatso walked to a corner of the square and waved his sleeves. A big golden table appeared on the ground. Let's cut the crap. Shirtai 1 to 1. Jiang Haotian 1 to 10. Those who are not betting, please move aside and make way. As soon as Fatso finished speaking, the people in the square immediately swarmed forward. I bet on Shirtai. I also bet on Shirtai. It's obvious. We have to bet on Shirtai. Everyone took out their soul stones. Some bet a dozen, some bet a few hundred, and some bet a few thousand. A short while later, the table was filled with soul stones. The 2 lackeys were busy collecting soul stones and taking notes at the same time. Seeing the crowd swarming over, Fatso beamed with joy. I bet 50,000 soul stones. I bet 100,000. To be able to take out so many soul stones, one had to be an inner disciple. Furthermore, he had to be one of the top inner disciples. It's so lively. At this moment, 2 men and 1 woman stepped into the square. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were stunned. They were Mu Tianyang, Mu Qing, and Guosweki. What? 1 to 10? When they heard everyone's discussion, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other. Such a high payout? Mu Qing laughed secretly. Ancestor, isn't this obviously giving us soul stones? Keep it low, keep it low. Mu Tianyang chuckled, walked to the table, took out a Qiankuan bag, and slapped it on the table. Fatso was stunned. He looked at the Qiankuan bag and thought to himself, so arrogant. Could it be that he was a rich man? Mu Tianyang glanced at the people around and suddenly grinned, saying, I bet on Jiang Haotian 5 million soul stones. As soon as these words came out, the entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone looked at Mu Tianyang in shock. Fatso and the 2 lackeys were also stunned. They had completely forgotten what they were doing. Voila! There was no suspense. The next moment, the square was in an uproar. What? It's actually Jiang Haotian. It's still 5 million soul stones. Oh my god, he's crazy. Who is he? Isn't he afraid that these 5 million soul stones will be wasted? Fatso came back to his senses and grabbed the Qiankuan bag. After carefully looking at it for a while, his face suddenly twitched. There really were 5 million soul stones. So many soul stones. Who wouldn't be tempted? Fatso swallowed his saliva, looked up at Mu Tianyang and asked, Are you sure you want to bet on Jiang Haotian? I'm sure. Mu Tianyang nodded. Generous. Courageous. You're the first person who dares to bet on Jiang Haotian. Fatso laughed and even gave Mu Tianyang a thumbs up, saying, Tell me your name. Mu Tianyang. Mu Tianyang said. Fatso looked at the 2 lackeys beside him and said happily, Quickly write it down. Okay. The 2 lackeys, one carefully counted the soul stones, and the other recorded Mu Tianyang's name. Mu Tianyang? This name is so unfamiliar. Wait, I heard that among the new disciples this time, there seems to be someone called Mu Tianyang. A new disciple actually has 5 million soul stones. Could he be a disciple of a big family? But to take out 5 million soul stones at once, even those famous rich families don't seem to have the ability to do so. The surrounding disciples felt that it was very unbelievable. Hearing this, Mu Qing sneered. What was 5 million? In a while, this 5 million would become 50 million. Just thinking about it made him excited. What is it? Someone dares to bet on Jiang Haotian. 5 million soul stones? A surprised voice suddenly rang out. It's Shirtai. Everyone turned their heads and saw a young man in black standing at the entrance of the square with a stunned face. If it wasn't Shirtai, who else could it be? The people automatically moved aside to make a path. Tai walked step by step to the gambling table and glanced at the crowd. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Who bet on Jiang Haotian?" "Me." Mu Tianyang smiled faintly. "You? You dare to bet on Jiang Haotian? Aren't you afraid of losing everything?" Tai sized up Mu Tianyang and sneered. "It's our freedom to bet on whoever we want. As for whether or not I'll lose everything, we'll know when the results are out." Mu Tianyang smiled. "Haha. I've never seen such a stupid person." Tai laughed, took out a Qiankuan bag, threw it on the table, and said to Fatso, "I'll bet 500,000 soul stones on myself." "Okay." Fatso nodded. "Kid, you'll regret this. Just you wait." Tai smiled coldly at Mu Tianyang, then walked to the altar of the first battlefield. He crossed his arms, glanced at the crowd and asked, "Jiang Haotian hasn't arrived yet?" "I didn't see him." Everyone shook their heads. "Don't tell me he's too scared to come?" Tai laughed. Many people also burst into laughter. Jiang Haotian's strength is indeed not good, but he's not that timid. However, at this moment, a faint laughter sounded. Everyone looked up and saw 3 figures flying through the air. The one in the lead was Qin Feiyang. Hua Yi and Fire Lotus followed behind him. Hua Lian also listened to Hua Yi's words, and put on another mask. Looking at the arrogant Tai, a cold glint flickered in the eyes of the 3. "They're here. They're finally here." Everyone quickly retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus landed in front of Tai. "They really dare to come?" Tai was stunned. Qin Feiyang smiled. "For the sake of face, I have to come, right?" Tai was slightly taken aback. He chuckled and said, "Face is worthless." "Yes. Face is worthless at all. What's valuable is life." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Ah, so you also understand." Tai laughed. "Of course I understand." Qin Feiyang smiled. "The smell of gunpowder is coming." Mu Tianyang smiled secretly. "I'm a little puzzled. Isn't Qin Feiyang always afraid of trouble? Why did he accept Tai's challenge this time?" Mu Qing was suspicious. "I think this Tai must have done something to make him angry." Mu Tianyang guessed. Tai looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Let's not talk nonsense and enter the battlefield." "Okay." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Brother Jiang, wait." Hua Yi suddenly said. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang looked at him in confusion. Hua Yi pointed to the gambling table and said, "Before entering the battlefield, you have to bet first." "Bet?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. "There's no time to explain. Come with me." Hua Yi dragged Qin Feiyang to the gambling table and looked at Fatso with a smile. "What's the odds for Jiang Haotian?" Fatso glanced at the 2 and said, 1 to 10. "So high." Hua Yi was stunned. His eyes suddenly shone with green light. Without hesitation, he took out a Qiankuan bag and threw it on the table, saying, "I bet 12. 5 million soul stones on Jiang Haotian." "What? 12 5 million? Oh my god. So much." Previously, that Mu Tianyang bet 5 million soul stones on Jiang Haotian. That was already shocking enough. Now there's another 12. 5 million. How many nouveaux riches are among the new disciples this time? The square was once again in an uproar. Fatso was also petrified on the spot. 5 million. Qin Feiyang heard everyone's discussion and turned to look at Mu Tianyang. "I didn't take a single soul stone from you. Why are you looking at me like that?" Mu Tianyang said indifferently. "You didn't take my soul stones, but how many villages and noble families did you have to kill to get 5 million soul stones? This doesn't include the soul stones that you and Mu Qing have already refined. You're really ruthless," Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. "Don't worry too much. In this world, the weak are prey to the strong. Besides, not all the villages and noble clans were massacred by me. Most of them, I only looted their treasure vaults." Mu Tianyang said indifferently. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Uncle Yuan shouldn't have saved this person in the first place. This was simply a scourge. While the 2 were talking, Fatso had already checked Hua Yi's Qiankuan bag. He looked at Hua Yi in a daze and asked, "Brother, are you serious?" "Of course." Hua Yi nodded. "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and register." Fatso's face was red as he roared at the two followers. Literature Museum. Chapter 2010. Hui turned to look at Qin Feiyang and urged, Brother Jiang, you should place your bet too. Me? I won't bet. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Why? Hui looked at him suspiciously. The others were also puzzled. Qin Feiyang said, I don't have confidence in myself. If I lose, won't I lose everything? Hui was stunned. Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing were also dumbfounded. What was this guy doing now? The others, on the other hand, burst into laughter, their faces full of ridicule. Shirtai's smile became even more brilliant. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, At least you have some self-awareness. However, it's best for you to bet. Because later, you might not be able to walk out of the battlefield alive. You're that confident? Qin Feiyang frowned. Yes, I'm that confident. If you're afraid, it's still too late to back out now. Shirtai sneered. Even if I'm afraid, I can't be a coward. You're very arrogant, aren't you? Well, if you have the ability, let's have a private bet. Qin Feiyang said angrily. What do you want to bet? Shirtai was stunned and smiled. 100 million soul stones. Qin Feiyang gritted his teeth and said. What? A private bet of 100 million? The faces of those who were laughing at Qin Feiyang suddenly turned pale. Wasn't the stakes too high? Shirtai's face also became extremely ugly in an instant. Don't you understand? Then I'll say it again. If I lose, I'll give you 100 million. If you lose, you'll give me 100 million. Do you have the guts? Qin Feiyang shouted. Do you have so many soul stones? Shirtai sneered. Qin Feiyang stammered and looked a little guilty. If I don't, I wouldn't dare to bet with you like this. Anyone can say that. But who knows if you have it or not? Come out and show us. Shirtai said indifferently. In his opinion, Qin Feiyang was just putting on an act. In other words, they didn't dare to enter the battlefield with him. They wanted to scare him and take the opportunity to escape. Qin Feiyang said angrily. There are so many people watching. Are you afraid that I'll go back on my word? Nonsense. If you want to go back on your word, what can you do? Shirtai shouted. So long-winded. I'll vouch for him. An impatient voice was heard all of a sudden. This voice. Everyone was shocked and hurriedly turned their heads to look. They saw a black-clothed youth standing outside the square with his hands behind his back. His aura was terrifying beyond compare. Lunatic. Everyone's eyes trembled. Even such a terrifying existence had come. The madman looked at Shirtai from afar and said, A mere 100 million soul stones is nothing. Shirtai, I'll vouch for Jiang Haoyan. Is that enough? Enough, enough, enough. Shirtai nodded repeatedly. Qin Feiyang looked at the madman meaningfully, then looked back at Shirtai and said, What about you? Can you take out 100 million soul stones? Shirtai's face was green and red. If you can't take it out, just admit it. No one will laugh at you. Of course, you can also find a guarantor. But I believe that such a large amount of soul stones, no one will vouch for you. Qin Feiyang sneered. That's right. Qin Feiyang wasn't targeting Shirtai, but Feng Zijuan. If he wanted to play, he would play big. This time, he must make Feng Zijuan pay the price. Vouch. Shirtai's face was gloomy as he said in a deep voice, Just you wait. After saying that, he soared into the air and flew toward the inner sect like lightning. What is he going to do? Everyone looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang looked at Shirtai's back as his eyes flickered. Without thinking, he knew that Shirtai was definitely going to find Feng Zijuan. This was exactly what he wanted. Hui's eyes flickered as he transmitted his voice. Brother Jiang, you're cheating Feng Zijuan. I'm cheating him. Qin Feiyang sneered. What's that saying again? You can't bear the evil you bring upon yourself. After suffering such a big loss in the treasure pavilion, why can't this Feng Zijuan learn from his mistakes and behave himself? Hui sighed and said, However, you must also bet on Fatso Jin. Why? Qin Feiyang was stunned. This Jin Fatso Jin is Feng Yuan's grandson. Hui glanced at Fatso who was standing beside the gambling table and transmitted his voice. What? Feng Yuan's grandson. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Yes. In fact, the real banker is Feng Yuan. This kind of gambling has existed in Nine Heaven Palace for many years. And without exception, Feng Yuan is the one behind all of them. Hua Yi secretly said. So brazen? The great elder doesn't care? Qin Feiyang frowned. Care? That's exactly what the great elder wants. Because the soul stones won from this kind of gambling will not go into Feng Yuan's pocket, but into the resource hall's treasury. In other words, this is using the gambling to earn soul stones from us disciples. Hua Yi pursed his lips. So that's how it is. What you mean is that the resource hall is the one who makes a profit, and the resource hall is also the one who makes a loss. Qin Feiyang said. That's right. The resource hall is actually the great elder's house. Hua Yi said. I really didn't expect Nine Heaven Palace to operate like this. Qin Feiyang secretly smiled and said, Don't worry, I'll place my bet. Then why did you say those words without confidence just now? Hua Yi was stunned and suspiciously asked. I deliberately said that to Shirtai. Think about it, if I directly bet tens of millions of soul stones, Shirtai will definitely think that I'm so confident. Do you have any tricks up your sleeve? Wouldn't it be boring if he chickened out at the last minute? Qin Feiyang smiled and secretly told the mermaid princess and Qin Rishwang to count the exact number of soul stones. And last night, they had already refined a lot. Hua Yi shook his head and laughed. How sinister, setting a trap for Shirtai as soon as he arrived. What? 100 million soul stones. Where do you expect me to find so many in such a short time? Intersect. In a cave, Feng Zijuan looked at Shirtai's shadow with a face full of anger. I know this is making things difficult for senior brother, but Jiang Haoyan has already said that if I don't agree, wouldn't I be falling into his trap? Shirtai said. Falling into his trap? What do you mean? Feng Zijuan frowned. This Jiang Haoyan obviously doesn't dare to fight with me, but he's afraid of embarrassing himself in front of everyone, so he wants to use this bet of 100 million to scare me. I think this person has no ability other than a little bit of cleverness. Shirtai said with a face full of disdain. Are you sure? Feng Zijuan pondered for a while and asked. I'm sure. Shirtai nodded. But 100 million soul stones isn't a small number. Even my grandfather won't give it to me. Feng Zijuan sighed. Then you can go look for your sister. She can receive 1 million soul stones a month. Would she lack this little bit? Shirtai said. This. Feng Zijuan was a little hesitant. Shirtai said. Senior brother, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Feng Zijuan gritted his teeth and said. Wait a moment, I'll ask my sister. Okay. Shirtai nodded. Feng Zijuan turned off the image crystal and sent a message to Feng Zihan. Sister. When Feng Zihan's shadow appeared, Feng Zijuan immediately called out affectionately. Feng Zihan looked at him indifferently and asked, You arranged for Shirtai, right? Feng Zijuan nodded. Feng Zihan said angrily, Didn't I say before? Don't get involved in Jiang Haoyan's matter in the future. Why won't you listen? I know, but this debt, if I don't settle it personally, I'll feel terrible. And this is a good opportunity. Sister, I've never asked you for anything before, but this time I'm begging you, lend me 100 million soul stones, or help me be a guarantor. Feng Zijuan begged. 100 million? Feng Zihan raised her eyebrows. Feng Zijuan briefly explained the situation. Frenzy is also here. Feng Zihan's brows furrowed even tighter. Feng Zijuan said, Sister, I promise, this time I'll get rid of Jiang Haoyan. Get rid of him? How did the two people Guiyong sent last time die? You don't know? Feng Zihan said. Those two people are only perfect war gods, and this Shirtai is a half-step divine lord. They aren't on the same level. Feng Zijuan said. Feng Zihan pondered. Feng Zijuan begged. Sister, I beg you help me. Zijuan, this is no small matter. If you succeed, grandfather and the others will naturally be very happy, but if you fail, do you know how they will punish you? Feng Zihan sighed and said. Don't worry, I won't fail. Feng Zijuan solemnly vowed. Feng Zihan took a deep breath and said. All right, I'll vouch for you. I hope you won't disappoint me. Forget it, I'll go and see for myself. There was some helplessness in her words. Thank you, sister. Feng Zijuan was overjoyed and immediately sent a message to Shirtai. After receiving the news, Shirtai was also overjoyed and flew towards the square. He's back. Seeing Shirtai return, Huiyi's mouth curled into a smile. Shirtai landed opposite Qin Feiyang and sneered. I don't have a soul stone, but someone vouched for me. What? Someone vouched for you? Qin Feiyang looked flustered. What? Are you afraid now? But it's too late. The person who vouched for me is the number 1 on the heaven list, senior sister Feng Zihan. Shirtai laughed. It's actually senior sister Feng Zihan. The surrounding disciples were shocked. Qin Feiyang stared at Shirtai and said in a deep voice, words have no proof. Whoosh. But before he finished speaking, a woman in a light purple dress landed on the square like lightning. It's really senior sister Feng Zihan. Everyone raised their heads and looked at Feng Zihan with eyes full of worship. Shirtai said, senior sister, this Jiang Haoyan still doesn't believe it. You vouch for me. Feng Zihan didn't speak. She scanned the crowd and finally found Madman outside the square. Swish. She took a step forward and landed beside Madman, frowning. What do you mean? You're actually vouching for Jiang Haotian? In fact, she was testing Madman's words. If Madman showed a confident appearance, then this Jiang Haotian might be hiding some unknown method. On the other hand, if Madman was just watching a show, then there was no need to worry. As long as I can enjoy a good show, it doesn't matter even if I have to pay 100 million soul stones. Madman waved his hand generously and said without a care. Chapter 2011. Hearing this, Feng Zihan looked at Qin Feiyang again. Qin Feiyang straightened his back and looked straight at Feng Zihan, but there was a hint of panic in his eyes. And this panic was clearly caught by Feng Zihan. Is he really pretending to be calm? Gradually, Qin Feiyang's eyes began to evade, as if the guilt in his heart was about to be uncontrollable. He asked, Senior sister, are you really going to vouch for him? Feng Zihan's eyes flashed, and she nodded without hesitation. She was almost certain that Qin Feiyang was pretending to be calm. Haha. Jiang Haotian, now that both of us have vouched for each other, let's quickly enter the battlefield. Right. By the way, let me remind you, once you enter the battlefield, life and death are up to fate. Be prepared. Shirtai kept sneering, his eyes full of contempt. Life and death are up to fate? The panic on Qin Feiyang's face was obvious in an instant. Frenzy, your 100 million soul stones are destined to be wasted. I just don't understand, how can such a person enter Turtle King Island? Feng Zihan looked at Frenzy angrily and said. Sigh. Frenzy shook his head and sighed. What are you sighing for? Feng Zihan frowned. You are usually such a shrewd woman, but now you are being played in circles without realizing it. Tell me, what are you thinking? Frenzy shook his head. Played? Feng Zihan was taken aback, and immediately looked at Qin Feiyang. The altar of battlefield number 1 had already been awakened. Shirtai was already standing on it, looking at Qin Feiyang provocatively. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, took out a Qiankuan bag, threw it to Fire Lotus, and secretly said a few words before stepping onto the altar. After stepping onto the altar, Qin Feiyang looked at Feng Zihan from afar, and a bright smile crept onto his face. Oh no. Seeing that smile, Feng Zihan had an ominous premonition in her heart, because it was a sinister smile that indicated that his scheme had succeeded. I bet 37 million soul stones on Jiang Haotian. Suddenly, Fire Lotus's voice rang out again. The entire place fell into a dead silence again. Feng Zihan also looked towards Fire Lotus, only to see Fire Lotus throwing the Qiankuan pouch that Qin Feiyang had given her onto the gambling table. 37 million soul stones? Something's wrong. Shirtai, come down quickly. Feng Zihan's eyelids twitched as he shouted at Shirtai. But it was too late. The two of them had already sent the altar into the battlefield. Fatty Goldie came back to his senses and looked at the Fire Lotus in shock. He quickly grabbed the Qiankuan bag and checked it. Stop looking. Not one more, not one less. It's exactly 37 million. Fire Lotus said calmly. Terrifying. Where did this fellow get so many soul stones? Mu Qing stared at the Qiankuan bag dumbfounded. Who knows? Mu Tianyang whispered. His heart was also shocked to the extreme. For the past half a year, he had been robbing, but he didn't get so many soul stones. Looking at the altar that was gradually dimming, Feng Zihan suddenly turned around and stared at Madman, angrily saying, "What do you mean? Are you ganging up to trick me?" "Trick you? You're thinking too much. You're the one who's stupid, coming here blindly," Madman despised. "You," Feng Zihan was so angry that his chest heaved up and down. He coldly snorted. "Then let me see what ability this Jiang Haoyan has to be able to defeat a half-step divine lord." Finish speaking. With a wave of her hand, a wisp of divine power flew out and poured into the blood-colored altar. Following that, a bloody light rushed out from the altar, and an image suddenly appeared in the sky above the square. And in the image, there was a dark and boundless world. The earth was fragmented, dark clouds surged in the sky, and there were wisps of tragic auras left in the void. This was the first battlefield. And in the void, two figures stood facing each other. It was Qin Feiyang and Shirtai. "This is your first time entering this battlefield." Shirtai smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded. However, Hui had already inquired about the situation of the battlefield, and told him on the way here. He knew that now the people outside were watching, so he had to end the battle quickly. After all, this Shirtai was a half-step divine lord. The slightest carelessness could cause him to be injured. Injuries were small, but bleeding was a big deal. Shirtai smiled and said, "Since it's your first time entering the battlefield, then I will kindly tell you the rules of this battlefield." "Rules? What rules? Isn't it just to use all means? Don't talk nonsense, let's begin," Qin Feiyang said lightly. "You actually know?" Shirtai was surprised. However, Qin Feiyang's attitude made him feel very displeased. Rumble. A monstrous divine might emerged, blotting out the sky as it pressed down on Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang did not move. His face was also without any ripples. "Don't pretend anymore. The oppressive power of a half-step divine lord can even imprison a perfect realm war god, let alone a mere initial realm war god. Now I guess you can't even move." Shirtai walked step by step towards Qin Feiyang. His face was full of smiles as he said, "Do you know how stupid you are?" Qin Feiyang still did not speak, but there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. He actually thought that he could imprison him with just this pressure? It's too ridiculous. A mere initial realm war god dares to accept the challenge of a half-step divine lord? Tell me, are you stupid or not? But this is also good. Do you know why? Because you've helped me. Shirtai smiled. Indeed, I've helped you. After killing me, you can ask Feng Zijuan for credit. At that time, a lot of wealth and a good future will be waiting for you. Qin Feiyang said. He can still talk? Shirtai's expression froze. The people outside also had a look of disbelief. Logically speaking, shouldn't he be unable to even move his mouth after being imprisoned by the pressure of a half-step divine lord? Wealth and a good future, everyone wants it, but it also depends on whether they have the life to enjoy it. Is the pressure of a half-step divine lord very powerful? The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted. He slowly raised his arm and a murderous aura suddenly surged out. A blood-red long sword quickly condensed in his hand. Boom. As soon as the blood-red long sword appeared, a shocking murderous aura instantly swept across hundreds of thousands of miles of the void like a tide. Even the people outside felt a great sense of threat. This guy really has a trump card hidden. Lunatic muttered. The outcome has been decided. Mu Tianyang smiled faintly. Indeed. Mu Qing nodded. On the battlefield, Shirtai stared at the blood-red long sword with disbelief in his eyes. Why is this murderous aura so terrifying? He felt as if he was facing a god of death. His body and mind could not help but tremble. The arrogance from before was also nowhere to be found. Actually, I don't care what you want to do to me, but you hurt Fire Lotus. This is absolutely unforgivable. Forgive me for the mistake you have made. Qin Feiyang's eyes surged with murderous intent. He used the travel character art and teleported behind Shirtai. So fast. Shirtai's eyes trembled. He hurriedly turned around, divine power surging out as he lunged at Qin Feiyang. Bullying my family, even if you are the heavenly emperor, I will not allow it. Qin Feiyang shouted explosively as he raised his hand and waved it in midair. An expanse of golden light surged out explosively, and it was like a golden tide that roared through the sky as it fiercely collided with the divine energy. Boom! After a short stalemate, the divine power immediately rebounded and drowned Shirtai. Screams of pain and agony immediately rang out. What's going on? He actually rebounded Shirtai's divine power? The people outside were in disbelief as they watched this scene. What kind of technique was this? It was so heaven-defying. Even Feng Zihan's pupils suddenly shrank. At the same time, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other and glanced at Fire Lotus at the same time. So it was because Shirtai had bullied this woman. He was courting death. What did Qin Feiyang care about the most? That was the people around him. Bullying the people around him was tantamount to touching his reverse scale. But then again, who was this woman? Why did Qin Feiyang care so much about her? I don't think I've seen her before. On the battlefield. How can I be so useless? I'm even afraid of a low-tier god of war. No. I'm a half-step monarch god. One is the sky, one is the earth. How can I lose to him? Shatter. Shirtai, who was submerged in divine power, had an extremely malevolent expression. Following a roar, a huge black tiger broke through the divine power and pounced towards Qin Feiyang with its claws and fangs bared. The terrifying divine power shattered everything in all directions. Divine technique. Qin Feiyang squinted his eyes. It was a perfect divine technique. I can't fight it head-on. Swish. The Xing character formula and teleport. In an instant he disappeared from Shirtai's sight. The giant black tiger missed and shattered tens of thousands of miles of space. Shirtai's eyes were filled with surprise. But in the next moment, a terrifying light appeared behind him. Qin Feiyang raised his blood-colored longsword and furiously chopped down. Waves of blood-red sword energy pounced towards Shirtai like a toppling mountain and overturning sea. I'm a half-step monarch god. I won't lose. Shirtai's hair fluttered in anger. With a clang, a black battle-axe appeared. Divine power surged. The battle-axe instantly recovered. Then, he grabbed the battle-axe and slashed at the sword energy. Rumble. The sword energy was shattered. A mouthful of blood surged up Qin Feiyang's throat, but he forcefully swallowed it down. His eyes were filled with astonishment. This was actually a supreme-grade divine artifact. A half-step monarch god's cultivation base, coupled with a supreme-grade divine artifact, was still somewhat difficult to deal with. Haha. Regardless of how strong your means are, it still can't make up for the gap between our cultivation bases. Go to hell for me. Shirtai is floating again. Holding his battle-axe, he charges towards Qin Feiyang. You're really arrogant. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Instead of retreating, he moved forward to meet him. Just before the two met, Qin Feiyang flashed again and disappeared without a trace. Don't hide if you have the guts. Shirtai roared. You're thinking too much. I don't want to fight you head-on. I just don't want to destroy that battle-axe. Qin Feiyang's voice sounded in Shirtai's ears. However, when these words fell into Shirtai's ears, he couldn't help but laugh in anger. He actually had ideas about his battle-axe. Clang. With a backhand, he slashed out with the battle-axe. The void was shattered, and the wind was deafening. The power emitted was extremely terrifying. Chapter 2012. Your battle awareness is not bad. Qin Feiyang muttered. He dodged the battle-axe and teleported. Using the walk character, he instantly appeared in front of Shirtai. Clang. The blood-red sword in his hand went straight for Shirtai's abdomen. But as the blood-red sword was about to pierce Shirtai's abdomen, Shirtai suddenly sped up and retreated. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Do you think you're the only one with an auxiliary divine art? I have one too. Although it's not as good as your auxiliary divine art, it's still a perfect one. Shirtai laughed as the battle-axe shone brightly. A giant axe shadow split the sky and the earth as it charged towards Qin Feiyang. He's still a bit difficult to deal with. Qin Feiyang murmured. Most of the opponents he had met before were peak perfection battle gods. Although there was only one level difference between a peak perfection battle god and a half-divine lord, their strength and speed were worlds apart. Especially in terms of divine arts. The divine arts of a peak perfection battle god couldn't surpass the divine lord level no matter how high their level was. Because not every divine art was like the 6-word divine art, which could ignore the existence of realms. But a half-divine lord was different. Although a half-divine lord was only half a step, he had officially entered the divine lord level. In other words, a half-divine lord was no longer restricted by this level. Therefore, a divine art used by a half-divine lord was naturally more powerful than a peak perfection battle god. Of course, if Shirtai didn't have a perfect divine art or a supreme-grade divine weapon, Qin Feiyang would still be able to defeat him. For example, He Long. He was also a half-divine lord, but because he didn't have a powerful divine art, he couldn't even fight back when Qin Feiyang used the 6-word divine art. In the blink of an eye, the giant axe shadow had already arrived. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath. It seemed that he had to use some tricks. Actually, even if Shirtai had a perfect divine art or a supreme-grade divine weapon, it would be easy to defeat him. The main reason was that Qin Feiyang really didn't want to destroy this battle axe. This was because Tang Hai and the others lacked divine artifacts. As for peak god artifacts, even in the ancient realm, they were very difficult to find. Thus, they could only settle for the next best thing and start with top-quality god artifacts. After all, a supreme-grade divine artifact had already given birth to an artifact spirit. As long as it was given enough time, it could grow into a pinnacle divine artifact, or even a legendary divine artifact. Whoosh! As the giant axe shadow was about to strike, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed, and he activated his concealment art. Seeing Qin Feiyang disappear, Shirtai instinctively turned his head and looked behind him. However, there was no sign of Qin Feiyang in the void behind him. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. Why did he disappear for so long? It should be known that regardless of whether it was teleportation or a powerful auxiliary divine art, they could only disappear for a moment. Where are you looking? Qin Feiyang's voice suddenly sounded in front of Shirtai. Shirtai shuddered and quickly turned around. However, there was no sign of Qin Feiyang in front of him. What the hell is going on? Shirtai was extremely puzzled. There was only a voice, but no one? Could it be that he knew how to turn invisible? Puff! Suddenly, a blood-red long sword, like a poisonous snake, emerged from the void and instantly pierced into Shirtai's lower abdomen. Ah! Shirtai immediately let out a painful scream, and his aura was like a deflated balloon. Without the support of divine power, the battle axe in his hand dimmed. How is this possible? Shirtai lowered his head and looked at the blood-red long sword in his lower abdomen, his eyes filled with disbelief. I'm sorry, I won this battle. Qin Feiyang also appeared in front of Shirtai with a faint smile on his face. How did you do it? Shirtai looked up at Qin Feiyang and asked in disbelief. I have mastered a divine art that can turn me invisible. Qin Feiyang said lightly. You can really turn me invisible? Shirtai was stunned and roared. Are you kidding me? Using such a despicable method? Along with this roar, a divine sense that blotted out the sky and covered the earth emerged and pounced towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shook his head and drew out the blood-red long sword. With a light wave, the divine consciousness was completely shattered. Divine consciousness was like divine power, without the help of any divine art or divine weapon. It was like a dead tree in front of the blood-red long sword, unable to withstand a single blow. With the divine consciousness shattered, Shirtai let out a miserable scream. He felt as if his divine soul was about to be torn apart. With a bang, he fell to the ground below. The battle axe in his hand also fell to the ground. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and landed on the ground. He grabbed the battle axe and threw it into the castle. Then he raised his hand and with a clang, the blood-red long sword was placed against Shirtai's neck. He lost just like that? The square outside was dead silent. Tens of thousands of disciples opened their eyes in anger. Shirtai was a half-step divine lord. How could a mere lesser-tier battle god defeat him so easily? Oh my god! What was going on? Was this a joke? Not to mention a small success war god. Even a perfection war god would never be able to defeat a half-step divine monarch. What is that blood-red long sword? Even the divine body and divine consciousness of a half-step divine lord were pierced through and shattered. Waves of shock surged through everyone's hearts. A war god of war god defeated a half-step divine lord in the Nine-Heaven Palace. No. Even in the entire North region, this was the first time this had happened. Actually, many people didn't know that Qin Feiyang wasn't the only one who could do this. Beside them, there was another person who could do this. This person was Mu Tianyang. In the square, feeling the killing intent and sharpness of the blood-red long sword, Shirtai fell to the ground. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "Is this the result you wanted?" No. It's my fault. I was blind and shouldn't have challenged you. Please let me go." Shirtai shook his head and his face was filled with fear. "It's really nothing to challenge me. What makes me angry is that if you want to send a letter of challenge, then send a letter of challenge. Why did you bully my sister?" Qin Feiyang's sword fell, and with a flash of sword light, Shirtai's 2 arms were cut off on the spot. 2 bowl-sized wounds were bleeding profusely. "I'm sorry, I apologize. Junior brother Jiang." No. Big brother Jiang. "I'm willing to compensate for your sister's loss. I'm even willing to kneel down and apologize to her in front of everyone. I beg you, please be merciful." Shirtai was terrified to the extreme. But before he could finish his words, Qin Feiyang raised his hand, and with a flash of sword light, Shirtai's 2 legs were cut off. "I've always been a kind person, but I won't let those who bully my family off easily. Even if you're number 1 on the sky leaderboard, it's the same." Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the sky. His eyes were emitting blood-red killing intent. These words weren't only spoken to Shirtai, but also to the people outside, especially Feng Zihan. In short, this was a warning. If there's anything, just come at him. But if anyone dares to bully the people around him, they will all die. Looking at Qin Feiyang's eyes at this moment, Feng Zihan's eyebrows twitched. Her slender fingers were tightly clenched. She didn't care about the warning. The only thing that made her angry was that he actually pointed out the number 1 on the heaven list in front of everyone. Wasn't this deliberately targeting her? At the same time, the disciples once again looked at Fire Lotus. Their eyes were already filled with fear. In the future, who would dare to bully her? They were also envious, because everyone wants such a strong brother who loves them so much. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang in the image and felt touched. Although they weren't blood-related siblings, she could clearly feel that Qin Feiyang truly treated her as his blood-related sister. On the battlefield. "I really know my mistake. I won't dare to do it again. Brother Jiang, I'm sorry. Please be magnanimous and forgive me." Shirtai laid on the ground like a puddle of mud. He looked at Qin Feiyang pitifully. His heart was filled with despair. "Forgive you? That's too simple." Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze and lowered his head to look at Shirtai. He smiled and said, "Do you still remember how you treated my sister?" Shirtai stammered. He really didn't dare to say it. "It just happened yesterday. Don't you remember it so quickly?" "But I won't forget." After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he raised his hand and slapped Shirtai hard on the face. With a bang, Shirtai flew out and hit a rock. His head was bleeding. "Do you remember it now?" Qin Feiyang walked over step by step. I remember. Shirtai nodded repeatedly. He was filled with regret. If he knew that this person was so cruel, he wouldn't have dared to touch Fire Lotus even if he was beaten to death. "It's good that you remember. My principle as a person is that I won't offend people if they don't offend me. But if they provoke me, then I'll definitely repay them 100 times. Qin Feiyang picked Shirtai up with one hand and raised his other arm. The blood-colored sword dissipated. Following that, he slapped Shirtai's face one after another without mercy. Smack. 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 One crisp slap after another resounded in the battlefield and the square outside. Everyone exchanged glances. An inner sect disciple, and a half-step divine lord at that, was actually abused to this extent by an outer sect disciple. It was truly more painful than death. In the end, Shirtai suffered a total of 100 slaps. His face had long turned into mud. He didn't even have the strength to scream. Can't take it anymore? It's not over yet. Qin Feiyang laughed coldly. He took out a healing pill and stuffed it into Shirtai's mouth. He's already been abused to this extent, and it's not over yet? He's still feeding him a healing pill. Does that mean that he'll continue after Shirtai recovers from his injuries? Is this guy a devil? Everyone was aghast. They couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Who could withstand such inhumane torture? Bang! Suddenly, in the scene, Qin Feiyang smashed Shirtai to the ground, then stepped on Shirtai's head and sneered. Since you like to rub so much, then I'll let you rub as much as you want today. His foot continued to exert force. Shirtai's entire face kept rubbing against the ground. Blood dyed the soil red. The flesh on his face was torn apart bit by bit. That heart-wrenching pain made him faint several times. Devil! He's really a devil. This scene made everyone shudder with fear and trepidation. Such a fierce person must be kept at a respectful distance in the future. Chapter 2013. Just kill me. I'm not begging you to let me go. I just beg you to kill me quickly. Shirtai also completely collapsed. This kind of torture was worse than death. It was better to die a quick death. You want to die? Sure. But first answer a few questions of mine. Qin Feiyang was very satisfied. The anger in his heart finally dissipated. Ask. Shirtai said weakly. Qin Feiyang said. Who ordered you? Don't you know? Shirtai said. Qin Feiyang said. I want you to say it yourself. It's Feng Zijuan. Shirtai said. What did he ask you to do? Qin Feiyang asked. He asked me to challenge you. And then on the battlefield to kill you, Shirtai said. Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth and said. Why did he want to kill me? Back then in the treasure pavilion, you caused him to lose face, so he held a grudge and wanted to get rid of you, Shirtai said in a staccato voice. Amazing. The dignified resource hall master's grandson, the son of 2 law enforcement elders, actually plotted against me, an outer disciple behind my back. This 9 Heavens palace is indeed crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Qin Feiyang sneered, and with a stomp, Shirtai's mind was shattered, and his divine soul was annihilated. Outside. At this moment, the disciples present all looked at Feng Zihan, their eyes extremely strange. Feng Zihan raised his eyebrows, his expression extremely unhappy. The last few questions were obviously deliberately asked by Qin Feiyang. Swish. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang appeared on the altar, without the slightest injury on his body, only the bloodstains of Shirtai. He stood on the altar, like a king returning, sweeping his gaze across the entire place. At the scene, besides Feng Zihan, Frenzy, and a few others, no one dared to look him in the eye. Feng Zihan coldly glanced at Qin Feiyang, then turned around and soared into the sky. There was nothing he could do about it. He had already embarrassed himself enough today. He really didn't have the face to continue staying here. Qin Feiyang chuckled and said, Senior sister, are you leaving just like that? What else do you want? Feng Zihan stopped in the air, turned around and stared coldly at Qin Feiyang. If it weren't for the fact that everyone was watching, she would have made her move immediately. Of course it's the 100 million soul stones. Don't tell me that senior sister's memory is also that bad. Qin Feiyang said. Feng Zihan took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He said, I'll go to my abode to get it later. She never thought that Shirtai would lose, so she didn't prepare 100 million soul stones. All right. After all, senior sister is number 1 on the heaven roll. She definitely won't go back on her word. Qin Feiyang smiled. Of course. Feng Zihan was on the verge of exploding. He smiled and turned to leave. Qin Feiyang said again, Wait, senior sister. Is there anything else? Feng Zihan clenched her fists and turned to look coldly at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, Don't you think you owe me an apology? Apology? Feng Zihan raised an eyebrow. Qin Feiyang said, Is Feng Zijuan your younger brother? Yes. Feng Zihan nodded, an uneasy premonition rising in his heart. That's right. Your younger brother harmed me behind my back. As his elder sister, shouldn't you apologize to me on behalf of your younger brother? After all, Empyrean Palace is also a place of reason, right? Qin Feiyang chuckled. Feng Zihan gritted his teeth and said, "This is your personal grudge. What does it have to do with me? Senior sister, touch your conscience and tell me, is this really just a personal grudge between me and Feng Zijuan? Don't take us for fools. If senior sister really has nothing to do with this matter, then why are you vouching for Shirtai?" Qin Feiyang said. Yes. If it's just a personal grudge, why would senior sister Feng Zihan vouch for him? What Jiang Haoyan said makes sense. Senior sister Feng Zihan might be the real mastermind behind this. I also heard that senior sister has moved to the outer sect. It probably has something to do with getting rid of Jiang Haoyan. Everyone whispered to each other. Feng Zihan scanned the crowd, and his face darkened. He stared at Qin Feiyang and said angrily, "Don't you dare slander me." Qin Feiyang said, "Then do you dare say that you don't know about this matter?" "I don't know," Feng Zihan said coldly. The dignified number 1 on the heaven leaderboard actually goes against his conscience. How disappointing. Fine. Senior sister is a big shot and has a backer behind her. I can't afford to offend her. Let's forget about this apology. I only hope that senior sister and the others won't make things difficult for me in the future. I'm just an outer sect disciple. I'm no threat to you." Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. "Enough. Don't be sarcastic. I'll apologize to you on behalf of my useless brother. I'm sorry. Are you satisfied now?" Feng Zihan said gloomily. Qin Feiyang gave her a thumbs up and said with a smile, "Senior sister is indeed worthy of being the number 1 on the heaven leaderboard. You're knowledgeable and reasonable." "Thank you for the compliment." Feng Zihan laughed angrily and turned to leave without looking back. "Brother." Fire Lotus retracted her gaze and immediately greeted Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang jumped down from the altar and rubbed Fire Lotus's head. He said with a smile, "Girl, how was it? Are you satisfied now?" Thank you, brother." Fire Lotus nodded. "We're siblings. Why are you being so polite?" Qin Feiyang smiled. Huai stepped forward and said with a smile, "Brother Jiang, you killed 3 birds with 1 arrow this time." "I don't understand what you're talking about," Qin Feiyang said. "Still playing dumb?" The first bird killed Shirtai and vented Fire Lotus's anger. The second bird made Feng Zijuan the target of public criticism, and made Feng Zihan lose his composure in public. Moreover, he lost 100 million spirit stones. The third bird indirectly proved your ability to Shangguan Fenglan. If this isn't killing 3 birds with 1 arrow, then what is? Huai transmitted his voice. "Brother Hua knows me best." Qin Feiyang smiled secretly. Hey, Jin Fatso, don't just stand there. Quickly exchange for spirit stones." At this time, Mu Qing's voice rang out. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 looked over and saw Mu Qing standing next to the bet with an excited face. But Jin Fatso opposite her had a bitter face. They thought this battle would definitely be Shirtai's victory. However, they didn't expect that the result would be Jiang Haoyan who took the crown of victory. Although this time, everyone bet on Shirtai, and only Jiang Haoyan, Huai, and Mu Tianyang bet on Qin Feiyang. The amount of money these 3 people bet was too big. One bet was 5 million. It was 75 million each. Jiang Haoyan was even more excessive, directly betting 37 million. The bets of these 3 people were much more than the total bets of those who had bet on Shirtai. And if Shirtai won, then these spirit stones would belong to his resource hall. But now Shirtai lost. Then he had to pay. And Jiang Haoyan's odds were 1 to 10. 1 to 10. In other words, Mu Tianyang 50 million. Huai, 127. 5 million. Jiang Haoyan, 370 million. Losing so many spirit stones could be described as a blood loss. Huai walked up and said with a smile, "Yes, Jin Fatso, don't dawdle. Quickly compensate us with spirit stones." "This. Can it be a little less?" Jin Fatso looked at them and laughed. "No." This time, Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang had a tacit understanding and shook their heads at the same time. Fatty Jin looked at them fawningly and said, "But there are too many of them." "You set the odds. What does it have to do with us?" "Hurry up, or we'll go ask the Great Elder for it. Hui said impatiently. Oh, okay. I'll give it to you right away. Jean Fatso's face changed and he quickly looked at the two little followers and shouted. Why aren't you counting the spirit stones? Brother Fatty, we have already counted. The spirit stones we brought this time are only a little more than 100 million, plus the spirit stones we bet on sure tie. It's far from enough to compensate. The two little followers said with a bitter face. This, Jean Fatso was stunned. Mu Tianyang said. Let me tell you, not a single spirit stone less. If you don't have it, immediately go to the resource hall to get it. Or we'll really go ask the Great Elder to help us. Don't worry, don't worry. Jean Fatso hurriedly smiled apologetically, looked at the two little followers and said angrily. What are you waiting for? Go back and get it. Okay. One of them immediately soared into the sky and disappeared like lightning. I'm so envious. Yeah. If I had known, I would have bet on Jiang Haotian too. If I had known, I would have bet all my wealth. Unfortunately, I didn't know. We've really lost a lot this time. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyang and the others. They had earned so many spirit stones in one go, which really made them envious. Qin Feiyang glanced at the crowd and looked out of the square, but found that Madman had already left without anyone knowing. This time, he really had to thank Madman. If it weren't for Madman vouching for him, Feng Zihan wouldn't even be able to think about the 100 million spirit stones. Mu Tianyang secretly laughed. Brother Qin, I told you as long as we cooperate, these spirit stones will naturally fall into our pockets. Qin Feiyang was stunned and frowned. When did we cooperate? This time you're benefiting from me, do you know? Yes. Thank you. Mu Tianyang smiled very happily. Although he didn't earn as much as Qin Feiyang, he only had Mu Qing and Guosweki by his side. For now, it was enough for a long time. Qin Feiyang was different. With so many people by his side, if he divided a little with each of them, there wouldn't be much left. Speaking of cooperation, I remember something. My cooperation with Shangguan Qiu, it was you who ruined it. Qin Feiyang secretly said. This matter really has nothing to do with me. Mu Qing acted on his own initiative. It's a misunderstanding, and I've already scolded him. Look, we have no relatives in the northern region, and you're our only old friend. How can we steal your business? Mu Tianyang said righteously. Keep pretending. Qin Feiyang sneered. It would be a pity if he didn't become an actor. Mu Tianyang secretly laughed and said. Brother Qin, don't be angry. Why don't we make another plan? To earn some more spirit stones? Hearing this, Qin Feiyang's interest was aroused, and he secretly said. Tell me about it. Look, although everyone knows your strength now, they still don't know my strength. I'll find someone to challenge, and then we'll make a big bet. Mu Tianyang smiled slyly. Now, he didn't look like an emperor at all. He was completely a money grubber. Chapter 2014. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and nodded. That's a good idea, but it's a little troublesome. What is it? Mu Tianyang was suspicious. Swish. Qin Feiyang was about to speak, but at this time, the follower hurriedly ran back and took out 3 qiankuan bags and handed them to Jean Fatso. Each qiankuan bag had a name written on it. They were Jiang Haotian, Hui and Mu Tianyang. Are you done counting? Jean Fatso asked. Yes. The follower nodded. Jean Fatso reluctantly looked at the 3 qiankuan bags and handed them to Qin Feiyang and the other 2, saying, You can count them. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 grabbed the qiankuan bags with their names written on them. Mu Qing, you count them. Fire Lotus, you count them. Qin Feiyang and Mu Tianyang threw the qiankuan bags to Mu Qing and Fire Lotus at the same time. Hui personally counted them and his face bloomed with joy. Mu Tianyang asked secretly, Brother Qin, what's the trouble you mentioned just now? I believe you also know that during the assessment, all the big shots of the 9th Heaven Palace were watching the whole process. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. I know about this. Mu Tianyang replied. Feng Yuan must have been there at that time, so he definitely knows your strength. And the manipulator behind this bet is Feng Yuan. Tell me, when you challenge someone else, Will he raise the odds? Maybe he won't even let Jean Fatso open the bet. Qin Feiyang secretly said. Makes sense. Mu Tianyang pondered. How about this? I'll challenge people on the heaven list. Suddenly, Mu Tianyang's eyes flashed and said in a deep voice. Challenge someone on the heaven leaderboard? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. The people on the heaven ranking are all extremely powerful. If I challenge them, Feng Yuan definitely won't think that I can win. When the time comes, the odds will naturally go up. Although it might not be as good as your current odds, it should still be 1, 2 or 1, 3. This way we can earn quite a lot of soul stones. Mu Tianyang said. Challenge someone on the heaven leaderboard? Are you confident? Don't scam me. It wasn't easy for me to earn so many soul stones. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang vigilantly. If I cheat you, isn't that the same as cheating myself? As for confidence, you don't have to worry. Although I lost to you back then, that was because you activated the slaughter zone. Without activating the slaughter domain, you might not be able to defeat me. Mu Tianyang smiled confidently and said, Besides, I have a heaven-defying divine artifact. What are you afraid of? Even with a heaven-defying divine artifact, you can't fully recover. Qin Feiyang said. Yes, I can't fully recover right now. But with the sharpness of the blood blade, even if I can't fully recover, crushing a legendary divine artifact is as easy as playing with a toy. In short, you just have to trust me. Mu Tianyang secretly said. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and shook his head. Let me think about this matter. You can plan first. By the way, did Feng Wenhai look for you? Yes. He asked me what is my relationship with you. Mu Tianyang said. Then how did you answer him? Qin Feiyang asked. How can I answer? Deny it. But after being tricked by you, he didn't believe it at all. Admit it. Then when the time comes, I will definitely become their target of elimination. So I can only tell him ambiguously that you and I are enemies and friends. Mu Tianyang said helplessly. Looking at Mu Tianyang's pouting expression, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but want to laugh. At this time, Mu Qing put away the Qianquan bag and looked at Mu Tianyang with a smile. Done counting 50 million, not a single one less. Soon, Hua Yi also put away the Qianquan bag with a smile on his face. After a while, Fire Lotus also nodded to Qin Feiyang. See, my resource hall is open and above board. I will never cheat you disciples of your soul stones. Jean Fatso laughed. Yes, yes, yes. The three of them nodded. Mu Tianyang sent a sound transmission. Brother Qin, then I will go and plan first. Qin Feiyang secretly replied. Let's go. Mu Tianyang waved his hand and left with Mu Qing and Guosweki, his face beaming with joy. Let's go too. Qin Feiyang smiled at Huolian and Huolian. Then, under everyone's envious gazes, he flew out like lightning. Brother Fatty, this time they are really lucky. The two lackeys looked at the backs of Qin Feiyang and the others with a gloomy expression. Don't worry, my resource hall's soul stones are not so easy to take. Sooner or later they will spit it out. Jean Fatso secretly sneered, then rubbed his forehead and sighed. This matter is troublesome. The old man must be very angry now. How can I explain it to him? Hearing this, the two little followers looked at each other and looked at Jean Fatso sympathetically. They were just errand boys. Everything was done by Jean Fatso, so even if they were to blame, it couldn't be blamed on them. However, Jean Fatso would definitely be punished this time. At the same time, 9 Heaven Palace Conference Hall. The Great Elder sat majestically. The group of giants next to him all lowered their heads and remained silent. Shengguan Fenglan and Feng Yuan were also there. However, the expressions of the two at this moment were completely opposite. Shengguan Fenglan's face was calm, but there was a trace of ridicule in her eyes when she looked at Feng Yuan. The anger on Feng Yuan's face was undisguised. At the same time, he was also extremely nervous, floating up to the Great Elder from time to time. Sweat could be faintly seen on his wrinkled forehead. The Great Elder suddenly looked at Feng Yuan and said lightly, Aren't you going to explain? Feng Yuan quivered and hurriedly got up. Great Elder, I don't know about this. You don't know? Feng Yuan, do you think that this old man has become muddle-headed? What is your grandson doing? How can you not know? The great elder laughed hoarsely. Feng Yuan wiped his sweat and said anxiously, Great elder, I really don't know if I know. I will definitely stop Feng Zijuan. The great elder smiled and said, Feng Yuan, you don't have to be nervous. In fact, this is not a big deal. Between disciples there are grudges, and friction is normal. Feng Yuan, am I right? Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Feng Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. But suddenly, the great elder changed the topic and said, This old man doesn't care about the friction between disciples. Even if Feng Zijuan killed Jiang Haotian, it can only be blamed on Jiang Haotian's incompetence. But if we senior figures also intervene in the grudges between disciples, it is absolutely intolerable, because this will destroy the balance. Once this balance is broken, there will be internal strife in Jiutian Palace. Feng Yuan, do you want this balance to be broken? The great elder looked at Feng Yuan with a smile and asked. Of course not. Feng Yuan hurriedly shook his head. That's right. This person, especially the management like us, must be fair and just in front of the disciples, and be a good example. That's why we'll just have to watch the disputes between the disciples below. The great elder laughed. Great elder's words are very true. Feng Yuan nodded. All right, let's put this matter behind us. And this Jiang Haotian is indeed a talent. If there's a chance, let him enter the inner sect. The great elder said. This, Feng Yuan frowned and said. Great elder, I'm afraid this matter is not appropriate. He slandered our Jiutian Palace. To let him stay in the outer sect is already benevolent. If we let him enter the inner sect, I think many disciples will not be convinced. That's true. The great elder nodded. Great elder, can I say my opinion on this matter? Shangguan Fenglan suddenly said. Feng Yuan looked at Shangguan Fenglan and frowned without a trace. The great elder was stunned and said with a smile. Go ahead. I think so. If Jiang Haotian stays in the outer sect for the rest of his life because of a moment of youthful frivolity and made a small mistake, it is a bit cruel. Shangguan Fenglan said. What you said makes sense. The great elder nodded. Shangguan Fenglan, slandering our Jiutian Palace. Is it only a small mistake in your eyes? Feng Yuan said angrily. Feng Yuan, why are you angry? I love talent and can't bear to do it. Besides, this person is not a saint, who doesn't make a mistake. Shangguan Fenglan said. Then what do you mean? Feng Yuan said. I suggest that we observe for a while. If Jiang Haotian really repents, then we might as well give him a chance to enter the inner sect. Shangguan Fenglan said. This suggestion is good, it's decided. The matter of observing Jiang Haotian will be left to the law enforcement hall. The great elder said with a smile. Shangguan Fenglan smiled and said. Great elder, I'll leave this matter to Feng Wenhai. I believe he will handle it impartially. That's good. That's it for today. Go do your own things. The great elder waved his hand and said with a smile. We'll take our leave. Everyone got up and bowed respectfully, then turned and walked out one after another. But suddenly, Shangguan Fenglan seemed to have thought of something and stopped. When Feng Yuan passed by Shangguan Fenglan, a hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes, but he didn't ask much and walked out of the hall without looking back. Seeing Shangguan Fenglan standing still, the great elder asked suspiciously, Fenglan, is there anything else? When everyone left, Shangguan Fenglan turned to look at the great elder and said, Yesterday at the stairway to heaven, Master told me something. The great elder was stunned, then shook his head and said with a smile, That old man, what good news can he tell you? Master told us to stop looking for the whereabouts of the Vice Palace Master. And he also asked me to tell you to be careful not to draw fire to yourself. Shangguan Fenglan said. Stop looking for him? The great elder frowned and said, Does he know the whereabouts of the Vice Palace Master? I asked, but he didn't say. Shangguan Fenglan said helplessly. It's really his character. The great elder shook his head and said helplessly, Then what did he mean by drawing fire to himself? I don't understand either. But I feel that it should have something to do with Jiang Haotian. Because at that time, the old man and I were discussing Jiang Haotian. Shangguan Fenglan said. Jiang Haoyan. The great elder pondered for a moment, and after a while, he sighed deeply and said, "This old man should know something, but with his character, no matter how we ask, he will definitely not tell us. Forget it. Pay more attention to Jiang Haoyan in the future. He must be under our control." "Then what if we lose control?" Shengguan Fenglan asked. "I think you should know what to do," the great elder said with a smile. "Understood." Shengguan Fenglan nodded and didn't stay any longer. She turned and left quickly. After staying in Jiutian Palace for so long, she knew this old man very well. Although he seemed kind, in fact, he was a very ruthless person. Chapter 2015. Outer Sect. After returning to the Sword Peak, Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at the cave abode number 1 in silence. "Brother, what are you looking at?" Fire Lotus asked suspiciously. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "I really want to thank Madman in person." "Then let's go," Fire Lotus said. This time, Madman had indeed helped them a lot. "Forget it. He obviously doesn't want to interact with me too much." Qin Feiyang shook his head, brought Fire Lotus, walked to the entrance of the cave abode, and opened the stone door. But suddenly, he lowered his head to look at the ground, a trace of doubt crawling up his face. Under the stone door, there was a Qianquan bag. "Why is there a Qianquan bag?" Fire Lotus also noticed it. She picked up the Qianquan bag and checked it. Her expression was suddenly stunned. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang and Hua Yi looked at her in confusion. "Take a look for yourself." Fire Lotus handed the Qianquan bag to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang took it in his hand and scanned it with his divine sense. A trace of a smile appeared on his face. "What is it?" Hua Yi became more and more suspicious. 100 million soul stones, Qin Feiyang said. Hua Yi was stunned and said, "Did Feng Zihan give it to you? Who else could it be other than her? But this woman is really careless. She actually threw 100 million soul stones at the door. Isn't she afraid that someone will pick it up?" Qin Feiyang shook his head, his expression full of helplessness. Who would dare to pick up Feng Zihan's things? But she really took out 100 million soul stones, which is somewhat beyond my expectations. Hua Yi shook his head and smiled. With so many people watching, if she were to act shamelessly, she would be destroying her own image. Qin Feiyang took the Qianquan bag and entered the cave abode. Fire Lotus smiled slightly. Seeing that Hua Yi had also followed in, she asked suspiciously, "Big brother Hua Yi, you've already earned so many soul stones, why are you still following us? Those who don't know would think that you're our little follower." "How much do I have?" "Look, brother. Jean Fatso has 370 million, and Feng Zihan has another 100 million. All of this adds up to almost 500 million soul stones. What I have is just a fraction," Hua Yi said with an envious expression. "Small change?" Hua Lian was slightly taken aback and said speechlessly, "Then give us the change." "Yeah, we don't mind." Qin Feiyang also laughed. "Don't even think about it." Hua Yi clutched his universe bag, his face full of vigilance. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other and couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. "Brother Hua, to be honest, you don't want to cultivate, but we do. Can you give us some privacy?" Qin Feiyang said. "That's good. Let's cultivate together and have a companion, right?" Hua Yi chuckled. Fire Lotus said angrily, "I just don't understand. We just met by chance. Why are you pestering us?" "Little sister Fire Lotus, if you talk like that, I'll feel uncomfortable. After all, we've gone through thick and thin together." Hua Yi looked at Fire Lotus with dissatisfaction. "If I tell you to leave, then leave. What nonsense are you talking about?" Fire Lotus was speechless and pushed Hua Yi out. Hua Yi kept scolding him for being heartless. However, Fire Lotus remained indifferent. With a bang, she closed the stone door. Following that, Fire Lotus turned and walked in front of Qin Feiyang and said helplessly, "Qin." "Shuh." Qin Feiyang made a shushing gesture and said, "In the future, other than in the ancient castle and Black Tortoise realm, you have to call me brother. Especially the word Qin. Don't mention it." "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus was suspicious. In this ancient realm, many people have hidden soul stone. So even in the cave, even if there's no one around, it's not necessarily safe. Qin Feiyang secretly said. You mean, there might be someone spying on us in the dark? Fire Lotus looked at the void in surprise. I don't exclude this possibility. Maybe there's someone standing beside us with a spatial divine object. Qin Feiyang said. Okay, I'll be careful. Fire Lotus nodded. Let's go to the ancient castle. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the two of them instantly disappeared. Pa. At the same time, in a large hall, accompanied by a loud slap, a purple-clothed youth flew out and slammed into a stone pillar in the hall. Blood gushed out of his mouth. This person was Feng Zijuan. An old man stood in the middle of the hall, his hair standing on end. He was fuming with rage, his eyes glaring. If this person wasn't Feng Yuan, who else could it be? Feng Zihan, Feng Wenhai, and Jin Fatso were also there. The three of them stood by the side and looked at the angry Feng Yuan and the embarrassed Feng Zijuan. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Bastard, bastard! What stupid things have you done? Today, I must beat you to death. Feng Yuan was furious to the extreme. He stepped forward and kicked Feng Zijuan's lower abdomen again. Ah! With a scream, Feng Zijuan flew out again. He then covered his lower abdomen and curled up in the corner, groaning in pain. Grandpa! Feng Zihan couldn't bear it and was about to plead. Pa! However, before Feng Zihan could say anything, Feng Yuan went forward in anger and slapped Feng Zihan's face. A blood-red palm print suddenly appeared, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. It's fine if your brother is stupid, but why are you being stupid too? In front of so many people, you were played by that little bastard. In the future, won't you, the first person on the heaven roll, become a joke? Feng Yuan shouted angrily. I was wrong. Feng Zihan was the first on the heaven roll. In front of this old man, he did not dare to disobey him at all. He lowered his head and said, And you? Feng Yuan looked at Jin Fatso again. Jin Fatso's body trembled. He quickly knelt on the ground and said in panic, Grandfather, I'm sorry, This old man wants to know, why did you raise the odds to 1 to 10? Feng Yuan said. Jin Fatso stammered. Feng Yuan said. You want to say that you think Jiang Haoyan is just a waste and will definitely lose to Shirtai? That's what I think. Jin Fatso simply admitted it, and then closed his eyes. No matter what, he couldn't avoid being beaten up. However, Feng Yuan did not make a move. Looking at Feng Zijuan, Feng Zihan and Jin Fatso for a long time, he let out a long sigh and turned back to his seat. He actually didn't beat me? Jin Fatso opened his eyes and looked at Feng Yuan suspiciously. You are all this old man's descendants. How could this old man really have the heart to beat you to death? It's just that today's matter really made this old man angry. Do you know that the great elder is already betting on Yigleo's husband? Feng Yuan said. What? Feng Wenhai was shocked and hurriedly asked. What did he say to you in the great council hall? He didn't mention any names, but everyone present knew that he was talking about this old man. Regarding Jiang Haoyan, we must settle this matter as soon as possible. Feng Yuan pondered for a moment, looked at Feng Wenhai and said, Wenhai, go and make some arrangements. Arrange what? Feng Wenhai was suspicious. The great elder admires Jiang Haoyan very much and has the intention to let him enter the inner sect. This matter is absolutely not allowed. Get someone to continue to pretend to be Jiang Haoyan's accomplice, and go outside to slander the Nine Heavens Palace. This way, when the great elder receives the news, he will definitely not show mercy. Feng Yuan said. Feng Wenhai frowned. Then where is Shangguan Fenglan? Shangguan Fenglan's attitude is still to let you deal with Jiang Haoyan's matter. I can see that she doesn't suspect you and still trusts you. Go ahead and do it. Feng Yuan said. Yes. Feng Wenhai respectfully responded. Feng Yuan looked at Feng Zijuan and said, Feng Zijuan. Grandson is here. Feng Zijuan hurriedly got up and knelt beside Jin Fatso. Feng Yuan sighed. This old man doesn't ask you to be as promising as your sister. I only ask you to stop making mistakes for this old man. Grandson understands. Feng Zijuan hurriedly nodded. Feng Yuan looked at Feng Zihan and said, Zihan, grandfather has a question to ask you. Why did you go to the outer sect? Feng Zihan looked a little flustered. Feng Yuan said, Is it because of Jiang Haoyan? Yes. Feng Zihan nodded. In fact, she was doing it for frenzy, but there were some things that she didn't dare to say. Enough. You're doing this out of kindness. However, there are already people discussing this matter. You'd better return to the inner sect immediately. You can't ruin your reputation in Nine Heavens Palace and affect your future because of a mere Jiang Haoyan. Feng Yuan said. Yes. Feng Zihan nodded respectfully. Since things had already turned out like this, what else could she say? Everyone disperse. Feng Yuan waved his hand. An ant-like outer sect disciple had caused their Feng family to become like this. It was simply a great shame. Late at night, Bus. Qin Feiyang, who was cultivating in seclusion, suddenly opened his eyes and took out the image crystal. A shadow appeared. It was Gong Zifeng. As soon as he saw Qin Feiyang, Gong Zifeng gave him a thumbs up and smiled. Big brother Jiang, today's show is really wonderful. As long as you're satisfied. Qin Feiyang smiled. Satisfied, very satisfied. That Feng Zijuan was beaten up miserably by my grandfather during the day. Gong Zifeng smiled until his face was round. You were also there? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked. Me? How could I be there? What happened to the Feng family? They never thought of me. I only learned about it when I went to see Feng Zijuan later. Gong Zifeng pursed his lips. Qin Feiyang said. That's good. It's best if you don't get involved in this matter. You've already told me this, I remember. Gong Zifeng nodded and smiled, saying, You didn't see how much Feng Zijuan hated you. However, because he hated you too much, he let down his guard against me and said something that was extremely unfavorable to you. Gong Zifeng's expression turned serious. What is it? Qin Feiyang frowned. Last time, didn't you ask me to investigate those who pretended to be your accomplices and slandered Nine Heavens Palace? I didn't investigate those people. But this time, my grandfather asked my father to arrange for people to pretend to be your accomplices and slander Nine Heavens Palace. Big brother Jiang, this might be an opportunity. Gong Zifeng said. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly, saying, You won't cry until you're in the coffin. Big brother Jiang, my grandfather is determined to kill you this time. You have to think of a way as soon as possible. Gong Zifeng was worried. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and pondered for a while, then looked up at Gong Zifeng and said, Let me ask you a question. You have to answer me honestly. Don't hide anything. Of course. Gong Zifeng nodded. Chapter 2016. Although you appear to hate your grandfather and father very much right now, I can tell that within that hatred, there is also a trace of longing. You desire to receive their love and care. Qin Feiyang said. I won't. I only have hatred for them. I want to avenge my mother. Gong Zifeng shook his head. Don't deny it. I have the same experience as you, so I know very well what you are thinking in your heart. You want to take revenge on them, because you want to seek justice for your mother. What I want to ask you is, if one day I really want to kill them, what will you do? Qin Feiyang said. Gong Zifeng wanted to say that they deserved it, but he hesitated when the words were about to come out of his mouth. Some things, when one really had to face it, one would know that it was a very difficult choice. Qin Feiyang said, See in your heart, you don't really want them to die. Otherwise you wouldn't hesitate now. Gong Zifeng looked at Qin Feiyang with some dissatisfaction, but after a long time, he lowered his head dejectedly and said, Big brother Jiang, am I very weak and incompetent? Sigh. Qin Feiyang sighed deeply. It was really not good to criticize these things, because in the past, when faced with such things, he had also felt helpless and helpless. How about this? I won't force you. You have your choice, and I also have my own things that I must do. I only have one condition, don't betray me. Otherwise, I won't forgive you. Qin Feiyang said. Thank you, big brother Jiang. Gong Zifeng looked at Qin Feiyang gratefully and said solemnly, Don't worry, even if I die, I won't betray you. I believe you. Don't betray the trust one have in you. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly, and then turned off the image crystal. Qin Dage, you really believe him? Fire Lotus stood at the side and looked at Qin Feiyang with a frown. Isn't it good to have more trust between people? Besides, he doesn't know my true identity. Even if he wanted to betray me, the most he could do is give Feng Wenhai some information about me. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. All right, I'll leave it to you. However, Feng Yuan framed you this time. You can't just sit and wait for death. Fire Lotus said in a deep voice. I know. Once I break through to the greater success Battle God realm, I'll make the arrangements. Go outside and keep an eye out for me. Qin Feiyang said. All right. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent the Fire Lotus away. Then, after pondering for a moment, he sent a message to Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai. After giving them a few instructions, he began to focus on refining the soul stones. 470 million soul stones was already enough for 4 people to step into the half-step Divine Lord realm. Thus, Qin Feiyang could finally boldly refine them without worry. But all in all, these soul stones were far from enough. After all, in this ancient castle, besides him, there was the mermaid princess, Tantai Li Qin Rishuang, White-Eyed Wolf, Lei Bao Willow Tree, Golden Leopard, Cui Li Yuhuang and Blood Kirin. In addition to Zhao Tailai, Tang Hai and Dan Wangkai. 8 people and 5 ferocious beasts. The number of soul stones required for this was an astronomical figure. This did not include the Fire Lotus. Once he found the alchemy fire and alchemy furnace and got rid of his undead body, the Fire Lotus would also need soul stones to cultivate. This was a problem that he did not dare to think about, because when he thought about it, Qin Feiyang had a headache. He even had the impulse to rob the soul line of the 9 Heavens Palace. Day after day passed. Outside, the disciples were in an uproar. What? Jiang Haoyan's accomplice is still slandering our 9th Heaven Palace? He really won't change. This person must be severely punished, and our 9th Heaven Palace will be cleared. Everyone was discussing this. Fire Lotus had been paying attention to this news. Seeing that the situation was getting worse and worse, she was worried. Fortunately, the upper echelons of 9th Heaven Palace did not make any moves. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. Qin Feiyang finally opened his eyes. His eyes were like 2 bright moons, shining brightly, and his aura had soared to the level of a great success war god. With the ancient castle and soul stones, it's indeed fast. Feeling the surging power and divine power in his body, Qin Feiyang's face was full of smiles. Then he restrained his aura and looked at the mermaid princess and the others. The Blood Kirin had also broken through to the level of a great success war god. After stabilizing its realm, it began to break through to the level of a great success war god. In its eyes, with so many resources and such a good cultivation environment, if it did not work hard, it would be a waste of time. The White-Eyed Wolf and the other beasts, as well as the mermaid princess and the others, had all become lesser success war gods. Now they were all working hard to break through to the level of a great success war god. Everyone's cultivation was improving by leaps and bounds. Only Dan Wangkai was lacking. Phew. After letting out a long breath, Qin Feiyang stood up and left the ancient castle. When he appeared in the cave, he immediately saw Fire Lotus sitting on a stool with a worried expression. What's wrong? Did someone offend you? Qin Feiyang smiled. You can still smile. Fire Lotus rolled her eyes at Qin Feiyang and briefly explained the current situation. So it's because of this. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. I'm worried to death. Why aren't you worried at all? Fire Lotus frowned. What's the hurry? Haven't I already come out of seclusion? Qin Feiyang said. Then what are you going to do? Fire Lotus asked. This matter. Qin Feiyang was about to speak, but at this moment, a terrifying aura descended. Jiang Haoyan, Jiang Rishuang, Jiang Fire Lotus Hui come out. Following that, a cold voice rang out. Chengli. Fire Lotus was stunned and frowned. What is he doing here? Won't you know if you go out and take a look? Qin Feiyang smiled and strode out of the cave. Looking at Cheng Li, who was standing in the sky, he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Elder Cheng. May I know why Elder is looking for this disciple?" At this moment, Huai also walked out of the cave and looked at Cheng Li suspiciously. Cheng Li glanced at the three of them and frowned. "Why don't I see Jiang Rishuang?" Qin Feiyang said, "Elder, my sister is in seclusion. May I ask why Elder is looking for the four of us? Even now, she still has the mood to cultivate in seclusion?" Cheng Li secretly sneered and said, "The law-enforcing Elder has received orders from Wenhai to bring you to the law enforcement hall immediately." Feng Wenhai. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and he asked suspiciously, "What happened? What happened? Don't you know in your heart? Hurry up." Cheng Li coldly snorted. Fire Lotus's eyelids twitched, and she said, "Qin Dage must be starting to deal with us. Don't panic." Qin Feiyang secretly comforted and said with a smile, "This disciple is going to tidy up some things. Elder, please wait for a moment." After that, without waiting for Cheng Li's response, he pulled Fire Lotus and turned back to the cave. Huai also hurriedly ran into Qin Feiyang's cave. Cheng Li was taken aback and suddenly sneered. A person who was about to die, why would he need to tidy up? However, he did not know that when Qin Feiyang entered the cave, he immediately took Fire Lotus and Huai, entered the Black Tortoise world, and flew towards the heaven stairway without anyone knowing. About several hundred breaths of time passed. Seeing that Qin Feiyang and the others did not appear, Cheng Li stepped in front of the cave and impatiently shouted, "Hurry up! What are you waiting for?" But after waiting for a moment, there was still no response. "HM?" Cheng Li frowned and quickly walked in. Looking at the empty cave, he was stunned. Where were they? Meeting hall. A group of big shots sat silently at the table, each of them thinking about their own matters. After a while, the Great Elder was the first to speak, breaking the silence with a smile. "Now that I think about it, ever since this Jiang Haoyan entered Nine Heavens Palace, we've been gathering here every few days. If it was before, we wouldn't even see each other once in a year." Feng Yuan said unhappily, "Great Elder, from what you're saying, are you praising him? Everyone has their own value. Maybe the value of Jiang Haoyan's existence is for us to meet here more often and improve our relationship. Have you really not noticed that we are much more harmonious than before?" The Great Elder smiled. Feng Yuan was speechless. Shangguan Fenglan, who was sitting opposite Feng Yuan, had a calm expression, but there was a trace of doubt in her eyes. What the hell was this kid doing? It had been 5 or 6 days, but there was no movement at all? Da-da. Suddenly, accompanied by a series of hurried footsteps, a middle-aged man in black walked into the hall, his face full of anger. Feng Yuan asked suspiciously, "What's wrong with you?" Feng Wenhai said in a deep voice, "Father, Hall Master's Great Elder, something bad has happened." Everyone was puzzled. Feng Wenhai said, "Jiang Haoyan and the other 3 have fled for fear of punishment." "What?" A group of big shots stood up. Only the Great Elder, who had been sitting in his chair, did not have much of a reaction. "How do you do things? Just a few outer disciples, you actually let them escape?" Feng Yuan said angrily. Chapter 2017. Father, this has nothing to do with me. Not long ago, I sent a message to Cheng Li and asked him to bring Jiang Haoyan and the other 3 to the enforcement hall. But just now he sent me a message saying that the 4 of them are missing. If it were me, they definitely wouldn't be able to escape, Feng Wenhai said. Then why didn't you go there yourself? Feng Yuan shouted. How would I know that Cheng Li is so useless? I didn't know that they would escape, Feng Wenhai said with grievance. Bastard, bastard. Feng Yuan was furious. The others also had angry looks on their faces. Shangguan Fenglan suddenly turned to look at the Great Elder and said, Great Elder, give the order to arrest these 4 people. She was worried that Qin Feiyang and the others would run away with the soul stones. It really happened now. How dare they lie to her? She couldn't forgive them. Great Elder, it's obvious now that not only did they not repent, but they also entered the 9th Heaven Palace with a purpose, Feng Yuan said in a deep voice. What purpose? The great elder frowned. Didn't they earn some soul stones a few days ago? That's their purpose. Feng Yuan said. These little fellows are really audacious. The great elder shook his head and smiled. All right, we'll do as Shangguan Fenglan said and immediately issue the arrest warrant. Back to Qin Feiyang and the other two. Before Feng Wenhai went to the conference hall, the three of them had already walked down the sky stairway and passed by the white-haired old man, disappearing into the Sky Dragon mountain range. Because the news had not spread out, the white-haired old man did not know. Soon, Cheng-Li ran over and asked the white-haired old man. When he heard that the three of them had left, he became anxious and immediately sent a message to Feng Wenhai. Feng Wenhai was furious. He took out an image crystal and quickly sent out an order. Somewhere in the Sky Dragon mountain range, inside the Black Tortoise realm, Huai looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang and asked, Brother Jiang, Fire Lotus, what's going on? You don't know? Fire Lotus was surprised. I've been in seclusion these days. Wait, did something happen in the past few days? Huai was bewildered. How rare. He actually went into closed-door training. I thought you went to inquire about Shangguan Fenglan's situation again. Qin Feiyang joked. Huai's face darkened and he said, Don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and tell me what happened. Something big happened. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, Fire Lotus, tell him. Fire Lotus nodded and told him about how Feng Yuan and his son had framed them. Damn it. This is too much. Huai was infuriated by Huang Xiaolong's words. He frowned and said, That's not right. If we leave the Nine Heavens Palace now, isn't that the same as fleeing from punishment? Absconding? That's the effect I want. Qin Feiyang sneered. What? Huai and Fire Lotus looked at each other and looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Feng Wenhai and the others must be eliminated to prevent future troubles. But Feng Yuan is the hall master of the resource hall, and Feng Wenhai is an elder of the enforcement hall. It won't be easy to kill them. So this matter must be made known. It's best if everyone in the northern region knows about it. Qin Feiyang smiled. Are you crazy? Huai said angrily. You don't understand. There are very few people who know about this matter. Even if we tell the truth now, we can't bring down Feng Wenhai, let alone Feng Yuan. After all, their status is too high. The Great Elder will at most give them a few words of punishment. But if the entire northern region knows about this matter, the situation will be different. Do you know what's different? Public anger. The two giants of the Nine Heavens Palace actually framed their disciples. If they don't give the world a satisfactory explanation, the Nine Heavens Palace's reputation won't be as simple as tarnishing. Qin Feiyang said. I understand. When the truth is out, to save the public's anger and restore the Nine Heavens Palace's reputation, the other giants will definitely kill one as an example. Huai said in realization. Yes. Although Feng Yuan is behind all this, he definitely won't die. Then it must be Feng Wenhai who will be the scapegoat. Qin Feiyang said. Haha. Brilliant. Huai laughed. Huo Lian also looked at Qin Feiyang with admiration. It turned out that he already had a card up his sleeve. No wonder he wasn't worried at all. Wait. Since it's the truth, there must be evidence. Do you have any evidence in your hands? Huai frowned. I think I should have. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. Should? Huai was stunned. What did that mean? Qin Feiyang didn't explain and smiled. Brother Hua, I'll have to trouble you to disguise yourself and sneak into Sky Dragon City to investigate the situation. Okay. Huai nodded and asked. What about you? Of course I'm going to find evidence. Qin Feiyang said. Huai said. I'm counting on you this time. I'll try my best. Qin Feiyang smiled. It's not that you have to try your best, it's that you have to do it. Without evidence, no matter how perfect your plan is, it's useless. Huai glared at him and swallowed an illusory pill, turning into an old man in his 70s or 80s. He then nodded at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and Huai immediately appeared in the void outside. He then opened an altar and quickly disappeared. Fire Lotus asked worriedly, Qin Dage, can you really find evidence? It's not me. It's Xiao Tailai and Tang Hai. Before I went into seclusion, I told them that with their ability, I think it shouldn't be a problem. Qin Feiyang smiled and took out an image crystal to send a message to Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai. Buzz. The two shadows soon appeared. Young master. The two seemed to be in a restaurant and bowed to Qin Feiyang. Where are you now? Qin Feiyang asked. Jade Zither Pavilion. Zhao Tailai said. What? Jade Zither Pavilion. Brother Zhao, Brother Tang. Don't you know that Jade Zither Pavilion is Feng Zihan's territory? Fire Lotus was shocked. Of course I know. But Fire Lotus, there's a saying that the most dangerous place is the safest place. Zhao Tailai smiled. I really admire you guys. Fire Lotus shook her head helplessly. Qin Feiyang said. Old Zhao, looking at the smile on your face, is it done? Of course. Old Tang and I have gone out in person. Is there anything we can't do? Zhao Tailai said proudly. Qin Feiyang said. What about the alchemy fire, the furnace, and the background of the city lord of Star River City? It's all done. Zhao Tailai nodded. Amazing. Qin Feiyang smiled. Of course. We didn't waste our time by your side all these years. Zhao Tailai said with a smile. Stop flattering me and get to the point. Tang Hai rolled his eyes at Zhao Tailai and looked at Qin Feiyang. Young master, are you coming to us or are we coming to you? I'll come to you. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said. Tang Hai nodded and gave the coordinates to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and appeared above the Sky Dragon mountain range with Fire Lotus. Then he opened the altar and went directly to Jade Zither Pavilion. It's them. At the same time, in the conference hall, Feng Yuan suddenly stood up and pointed at the image in the void in front of him. These big shots had been here all along, and the first elder had personally used his great ability to find Qin Feiyang and the others. Even if we find them, there's nothing we can do. Yeah, because we don't know where they've been teleported to. A few of the big shots sighed. Feng Yuan frowned and looked at the first elder. It's useless to look at me. With my current ability, I can only spy on the Sky Dragon mountain range. Beyond the range of the Sky Dragon mountain range, there's nothing we can do. The first elder shrugged helplessly. Shangguan Fenglan said, I think it's very likely that they've gone to Sky Dragon City. I'll send someone to search immediately. What have you been doing? Feng Yuan snorted. What do you mean? Shangguan Fenglan raised her eyebrows. Did I say something wrong? If you hadn't let them go at the stairway to heaven, would this have happened? Feng Yuan said. Shangguan Fenglan said angrily. I did that for the good of Jutian Palace. Yes, I admit that. But you also have to admit that this situation is caused by you. Feng Yuan said. Don't worry. I will take full responsibility for the mistakes I have made. Chapter 2018. Jade Zither Pavilion. In a room on the 6th floor. The tea room was filled with the rich aroma of tea. Qin Feiyang sat at the side of the tea table and took a sip from his teacup. He looked at Zhao Tailai and the other man sitting across from him and smiled. Tell me about it. It's like this. 5 days ago, after receiving your message, old Tang and I discussed for a while, and then we split up and hid in the various restaurants. After 2 days of waiting, we finally met two of Feng Wenhai's lackeys in an inconspicuous tavern. They pretended to be your subordinates in the tavern and said all sorts of things. We were very angry at that time, but we didn't alert them. We only used a recording crystal to record their conversation. Young master, please take a look. Zhao Tailai took out a recording crystal and waved his hand. An image appeared in the air. In the image, there were two middle-aged men. They were dressed very simply and didn't have the flame inscriptions of Nine Heaven Palace. The two of them sat across from each other, drinking and slandering Nine Heaven Palace. They're too much. Fire Lotus said angrily. Qin Feiyang looked at it for a while, then looked at Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai and asked, what happened after that? After that, the two of them left the tavern and went to another tavern. They continued to use your name to slander Nine Heaven Palace. They waited until midnight before leaving Sky Dragon City. Tang Hai and I followed them all the way until we met Guiyong in a forest outside the city. After meeting up with Guiyong, The two of them showed their true faces. So they're from the enforcement hall, Zhao Tailai said. Guyong? Qin Feiyang frowned. We've recorded all of this. Zhao Tailai waved his hand and an image appeared. On the screen there was a dense forest. Within the forest, the two black-clothed brawny men were like ghosts as they rushed to the top of a mountain. Guyong stood on the mountain peak. Brother Gu, it's done. The two burly men walked up and smiled obsequiously. With a smile on his face, Guyong asked, "No one noticed, right?" "No." The two shook their heads. "Very good." Guyong nodded and smiled. One of the brawny men looked around and said in a low voice, "Brother Gu, since the matter has been settled, what about the benefits that Elder Feng promised us?" "Don't worry. I will definitely give you the benefits that I promised you. Let's go. Follow me back to Nine Heavens Palace to meet Elder Feng." Guyong smiled. All right. The two of them nodded repeatedly, overjoyed. But at this time, a cold light flashed in Guyong's eyes, and he suddenly attacked the two of them. Before the two of them could react, they had already become wandering ghosts. After doing such a thing, it's obvious that he'll kill you to silence you. You still want a reward? What a bunch of idiots. Guyong sneered and destroyed the corpse. Then he opened an altar and left without looking back. The scene ended there. However, Qin Feiyang was not happy after reading this. Instead, he frowned even more. "Young master, what are you doing?" Zhao Tailai looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang asked, "Didn't you see Feng Wenhai from the beginning to the end?" "No." Zhao Tailai shook his head. "This is a bit difficult." Qin Feiyang lowered his head and said, "Isn't the evidence already conclusive? How can it be difficult?" Zhao Tailai was puzzled. "Old Zhao, you think too little of Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai. When these two videos are exposed, with Feng Yuan's ruthless character, he will definitely make Guyong the scapegoat. In other words, we went through so much trouble, but in the end, the person we got rid of was just a pawn, Guyong." Qin Feiyang said. "Makes sense. When the time comes, Feng Yuan and Feng Wenhai will insist that Guyong did all this behind their backs. Then they will be able to clear their names." Fire Lotus said. Zhao Tailai was stunned and frowned. "Old Tang and I didn't think about this. Then what do we do now?" Tang Hai looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and smiled. Although Feng Wenhai didn't show up, these two videos can be used to make Guyong hesitate. "Young master, you mean to use these two videos to threaten Guyong and make him cooperate with us?" Zhao Tailai said. "That's right. Guyong can get to Feng Yuan's side and make Feng Yuan trust him so much. He must be a smart person. As long as we take out the videos, he will know what the consequences will be. I believe that in this world, there should be no one who isn't afraid of death." Qin Feiyang smiled. Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. Fire Lotus said, "Then let's go back to Ninth Heaven Palace to find Guyong now." Qin Feiyang was stunned and smiled bitterly. "Girl, do you think we can still go back now?" Fire Lotus was stunned. Indeed. It was estimated that the entire Ninth Heaven Palace was looking for them now. But if they didn't go back to Ninth Heaven Palace, how could they find Guyong? Qin Feiyang smiled. "Actually, we don't need to go back to Ninth Heaven Palace to find Guyong." Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang took out the video crystal. Wang. Soon. A shadow appeared. It was Gong Zifeng. "Big brother Jiang, where are you? Do you know that the Great Elder has issued an arrest warrant for you? I heard that the law enforcement hallmaster, Shangguan Fenglan, has personally gone to Sky Dragon City." Upon seeing Qin Feiyang, Gong Zifeng said anxiously. "Arrest warrant?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. This speed was really fast. Gong Zifeng sighed. "Big brother Jiang, I know you were wronged, but you can't just run away like this." "I didn't run away," Qin Feiyang said. "You didn't run away? Then why did you leave Ninth Heaven Palace?" Gong Zifeng looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. "You don't have to care about this. Now I need you to do me a favor." Qin Feiyang said. "What favor?" Gong Zifeng was suspicious. Qin Feiyang asked, "Do you know Guyong's background?" "Guyong?" Gong Zifeng was stunned and nodded. Of course I know. He was originally from a small village. Later on, he entered Ninth Heaven Palace and gradually became my grandfather's confidant. Small village. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. Then where is his small village? I'm not sure about the exact location. But now, it's useless even if you look for him because his family has already moved to Sky Dragon City. Gong Zifeng said. Moved to Sky Dragon City? Qin Feiyang was stunned and smiled. This saves a lot of time. Big brother Jiang, don't tell me that you're in Sky Dragon City now. Gong Zifeng asked carefully. Not only am I in Sky Dragon City, but I'm also in your big sister's restaurant. Qin Feiyang smiled. Gong Zifeng was stunned and exclaimed, Jade Zither Restaurant? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Gong Zifeng's eyes widened as he looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. He's actually in Jade Zither Restaurant? Oh my god. This is too crazy. You don't have to worry about me. Tell me, where is Guyong's family in Sky Dragon City? Qin Feiyang asked. Near the North City Gate. I'll give you the coordinates. After Gong Zifeng gave the coordinates to Qin Feiyang, he frowned. Are you going to do something to Guyong? Why? You can't bear to? Qin Feiyang asked. How is that possible? This person has my grandfather's support and has never taken me seriously. Even if he is monitoring me, he is brazen. I have long wanted to kill him. Gong Zifeng snorted coldly. You will get what you want. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and turned off the image crystal. Qin Dage, let's quickly retreat. If Shangguan Fenglan finds us, we won't have a good time. Fire Lotus immediately said. Retreat? Qin Feiyang shook his head and took out an illusory form pill to change his appearance. What are you doing? Fire Lotus was surprised. Of course I'm going to find Guyong. Qin Feiyang smiled and sent the three of them to the castle. Then he opened an altar and directly descended on a small path near the North City Gate. This was considered the outskirts of Sky Dragon City. There were independent courtyards all around. The small path was lined with trees and it was quite quiet. And in front of Qin Feiyang, there was a courtyard that covered an area of 500 to 600 feet. In the courtyard, there was a lotus pond. The green lotus leaves were like jade plates. Under the sunlight, they shone with a sparkling light. Beside the lotus pond, there was a 3-story pavilion. At this moment, there was a woman who was trimming the flowers and plants in the courtyard. It should be here. Qin Feiyang muttered and walked to the door of the courtyard. Through the fence, he looked at the woman and asked, Excuse me, is this Guyong, Senior Ji's house? The woman stopped what she was doing and looked up at Qin Feiyang. She asked suspiciously, Yes, may I ask who you are? The woman's cultivation was not strong. She was only a 7-star combat emperor. I am Mushan. I took the liberty of coming here today to thank Elder Gu. May I know if Elder Gu is here? Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. He was gentle, polite, and approachable. But even so, the woman was still vigilant and asked, Thank him for what? Senior Gu accidentally saved my life, so I have been looking for an opportunity to thank him in person. Qin Feiyang said. Then you can send a message to him. The woman said. I wanted to, but I don't have a deep relationship with Senior Gu. Back then, he saved this junior unintentionally. Perhaps he didn't even notice this junior. But to me, it is equivalent to giving me a new life. So when I came to Sky Dragon City this time, the first thing I did was to ask about Senior Gu. I didn't expect Senior Gu to be from Nine Heaven Palace. I can't enter Nine Heaven Palace, so I can only come here. Please inform Senior Gu. Qin Feiyang bowed and said with an extremely sincere expression. This, the woman hesitated. Don't worry, I will not disturb him. I will thank him in person and leave. Please grant this junior's wish to repay your kindness. Qin Feiyang said. The woman looked at Qin Feiyang for a moment, and slowly let down her guard. She nodded and said with a smile, All right, come in and sit for a while. I will send a message to him. After saying that, the woman turned and entered the pavilion. Thank you. Qin Feiyang smiled gratefully and slowly walked into the courtyard. He looked around like a curious baby. Chapter 2019. At the same time, in the attic, beside a window, a woman stood there, secretly peeping at Qin Feiyang. It seems that there is no problem. After a long time, the woman muttered, then took out an image crystal to send a message to Guiyong. I didn't expect a woman to be so vigilant. It seems that this Guiyong has done a lot of heinous things. Qin Feiyang glanced at the attic. But why didn't he see Guiyong's other family members? Could it be that this woman was the only one? A moment later, boom. A terrifying aura descended in the sky above Sky Dragon City. Following closely, a majestic spirit sense enveloped the entire Sky Dragon City. Qin Feiyang looked at the sky, his eyes full of surprise. It seemed to be Shangguan Fenglan's aura. She really came to Sky Dragon City. Looking at this woman, she must have thought that he had run away with the Soul Stone. He took out the hidden Soul Stone without leaving a trace. It was the hidden Soul Stone that he had obtained from the statue of the first leader of the Vanga League in the Black Tortoise world. At this time, the woman hurriedly ran out, looked at the sky in surprise and said, "What's going on?" "I'm not sure." Qin Feiyang shook his head, then looked at the woman expectantly, and asked, "Senior Gu, when will you be back?" "I'll be back soon. But from what he said, he really doesn't have any impression of you," the woman said. At that time, when Senior Gu saved this junior, there were a lot of people around this junior. And this junior is just a nobody. A big shot like Senior Gu will definitely not notice this junior. Qin Feiyang laughed. The woman smiled and continued to look at the sky. About a moment later, Shangguan Fenglan's spirit sense retreated, and her aura also dissipated. However, the entire Sky Dragon City was in an uproar because of Shangguan Fenglan's arrival. Swish. Finally, an 8 feet tall man descended into the courtyard. It was Guiyong. The woman pointed at Qin Feiyang and said to Guiyong, "He's the one looking for you." Guiyong nodded and looked at Qin Feiyang for a moment. He smiled and said, "Little brother, how come I don't remember where I saved you?" "Senior, you're so forgetful. How long has it been since I left Nine Heavens Palace? Have you already forgotten about me?" Qin Feiyang snickered. Guiyong was shocked. He transmitted his voice. "Could it be that you are?" "Senior's memory is pretty good. Yes. I'm the Jiang Haotian you're looking for," Qin Feiyang thought. "Damn it. What are you doing here?" Guiyong immediately roared. These two sentences were not transmitted through voice transmission. Seeing this, the woman hurriedly asked, "Husband, what's wrong?" Guiyong was about to speak. Qin Feiyang snickered. "So this is your wife, then you have to be careful, don't scare her." Guiyong's pupils shrank. He tried to calm down and waved to the woman. "You go back to the house first. I have something to discuss with this little brother in private." "Okay." The woman looked at the two suspiciously, nodded, then turned and entered the house. "What do you mean?" Guiyong thought. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. "It's not convenient to talk here. Let's go to a safe place." "Where to?" Guiyong raised his eyebrows. "You'll know when you get there. Don't resist." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and brought Guiyong to the courtyard of the Black Tortoise world. "This place is?" Guiyong looked around, his face full of surprise. "My spatial divine item." Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and pointed to the stone bench beside him. "Please sit." Guiyong looked at the stone bench and said gloomily, "You're too despicable. Haven't you heard that you shouldn't implicate your wife and children?" "I didn't say I was going to hurt her. Why are you so agitated?" "Sit," Qin Feiyang said. Guiyong snorted coldly. "Don't give me that. If you have something to say, just say it." "Fine." Qin Feiyang nodded, and with a wave of his hand, Zhao Tailai appeared out of thin air smiling. "Old Zhao, let him see." "Okay." Zhao Tailai took out an image crystal, and the two images appeared in the void above at the same time. "What?" Guiyong was stunned as he looked at the two images. "What's going on?" There was no one nearby at that time, so why was it recorded? And by someone close to Jiang Haotian? A moment later, the images finally finished playing. Qin Feiyang sat on the stone bench and smiled. "Tell me about your current mood." Zhao Tailai also put away the image crystal and looked at Guiyong mockingly. Guiyong stood there for a long time. Unable to recover his strength, Qin Feiyang was a little impatient. He knocked on the stone table and said, "I'm waiting for your words." Guyong quivered and lowered his head to look at Qin Feiyang and Zhao Tailai. Suddenly, he smiled sinisterly and said, "You want to use this to threaten me?" "Obviously," Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. "Haha. Kid, you're too naive. If you directly handed this evidence to the big shots above, I would definitely not be able to escape death. But you came to find me in private. Aren't you courting death?" Guyong laughed. "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang chuckled. "You're just a small success war god. That you've already broken through? That doesn't matter. A mere large success war god is not even an ant in front of a small success divine lord like me. As for the person next to you, he's just a piece of trash. If I want to kill you, it's as easy as flipping my hand. As long as you're dead, who will know about this evidence? So you're still too inexperienced." Guyong sneered as his divine aura rolled out. "Who's the inexperienced one?" Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. The power of laws of the Black Tortoise realm suddenly appeared out of thin air like a tide and pressed down on Guyong. What kind of power is this? Guyong was shocked. Under this power, he felt as if he had fallen into a quagmire and could not move an inch. "It's indeed very easy for you to kill us outside. But here, you're just a little lamb. So don't resist. Sit down and have a good chat with the young master." Zhao Tailai sneered. Guyong looked at Zhao Tailai, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said in a low voice, "What do you want me to do?" Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "With your brain, I don't believe that you can't guess. That's impossible. It's not like you don't know Feng Yuan's position in the Nine Heavens Palace. If you want me to help you deal with him, it's the same as sending me to my death." Guyong said angrily, "If you don't do this, when these videos are exposed, you will still become their scapegoat. Isn't the result the same?" Qin Feiyang smiled. "But," Guyong hesitated. Qin Feiyang said, "I can promise you that as long as you help me, I will let you go and won't hurt your family." Guyong said, "Even if you let me go, Feng Yuan won't let me go." "Then don't give him the chance to kill you. As for me, I only need a video. I don't need you to testify in person." Qin Feiyang said. Guyong was taken aback. "You mean you want me to get a video of them framing you?" "That's right. When you get the video, take your wife, hide your identity and run away. Although this way, you won't be able to return to the Nine Heavens Palace. At least your life will be saved. After all, in a person's life, power and status are fleeting clouds. Life is the most important thing." Qin Feiyang smiled. "You even thought of my escape route in advance. You're really benevolent." Guyong sneered. "I'm a good person to begin with," Qin Feiyang said. "Shameless." Guyong laughed angrily. Qin Feiyang didn't care at all and smiled. "Then are you going to do it or not?" Guyong lowered his head and didn't say anything. After a while he looked at Qin Feiyang gloomily. "Will you really let me go?" "A gentleman's word. I won't lie to you." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Ooh." Guyong took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. "Okay, I'll do it. That's the right way. But I don't really dare to trust you. So it's necessary to control you." Qin Feiyang formed a seal with both hands, and an enslavement seal appeared. "What's this?" Guyong frowned and his face was full of vigilance. "Don't worry, it won't hurt your life. It's just controlling your divine soul, so that you won't betray me. When I get the evidence, I'll immediately remove the control on you." Qin Feiyang said. Guyong closed his eyes and smiled bitterly. In order to deal with this boy, it could be said that he had deliberately and racked his brains, but in the end he fell into the hands of this boy. If it was a funny ending, it would be really funny. Don't resist. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the enslavement seal disappeared into the top of Guyong's head. After the enslavement seal was completed, Qin Feiyang and Zhao Tailai were completely relieved. "My enslavement seal can not only erase your divine soul, but also peek into your inner thoughts, so don't play any tricks," Qin Feiyang said. "At this point, what tricks do I dare to play? I just want to end this matter quickly." Guyong sighed helplessly. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. If you want to be free, then quickly send a message to Feng Yuan. Send a message? Guyong was stunned. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked, Is there a problem? Guyong frowned and said, Didn't you ask me to get a video of them framing you? Why are you sending a message now? What do you mean? Do you think that I asked you to go back to them to get evidence? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Isn't it? Guyong asked rhetorically. There's no need to go through so much trouble. You and Feng Yuan can talk as usual, and we'll record it with the video crystal next to you. It's also evidence. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. Guyong was slightly stunned and patted his head hard, saying with a wry smile, Look, I'm scared silly by you. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Calm down, don't show any flaws. Let's begin. Guyong let out a long breath, took out the video crystal, and poured his divine power into it. The video crystal immediately emitted a dazzling light. However, after waiting for a while, there was still no response from Feng Yuan. What's going on? Zhao Tailai frowned. Guyong thought, maybe Feng Yuan is still in the conference hall. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, Then send a message to Feng Wenhai. Chapter 2020. Zhao Tailai was stunned and hurriedly said, Young master, sending a message to Feng Wenhai and sending a message to Feng Yuan are two different concepts. Go ahead. Qin Feiyang said. Think about it. If we send a message to Feng Yuan now with this evidence, we can directly accuse him. But if we send a message to Feng Wenhai, Feng Yuan will definitely be able to find an excuse. And relatively speaking, Feng Yuan is a bigger threat than Feng Wenhai. So now that we have this opportunity, we should get rid of Feng Yuan first. Zhao Tailai said. Naive. Without waiting for Qin Feiyang to speak, Guyong mocked first. Zhao Tailai raised his eyebrows and said, Do I not make sense? What you said is very reasonable. But you ignored Feng Yuan's position in Nine Heavens Palace. In other words, even if this matter is exposed, he will be fine. At most, he will be punished by the Great Elder. Guyong said. Are you kidding? Zhao Tailai frowned. Do I look like I'm kidding? Feng Yuan not only has a high position, but he is also good at winning people's hearts. Even if the Great Elder wants to kill him, the other big shots will plead for him. Facing the pleading of the big shots, what do you think the Great Elder will do? He will definitely give him a way out. The most important thing is that everything in the resource hall is managed by Feng Yuan. If he is killed, the resource hall, which has no successor, will definitely fall into chaos. This is the situation that the Great Elder doesn't want to see the most. Guyong sneered. Makes sense. Let's follow the previous plan and start with Feng Wenhai. As for Feng Yuan, we have to do it step by step. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and nodded with a smile. This is a wise move. However, although we failed to topple Feng Yuan this time, I reckon that after this incident, the Great Elder will also begin to arrange for the next successor of the Hall Master of the Resource Hall, and slowly strip Feng Yuan of his power. Guyong said. Qin Feiyang said in surprise. You are quite far-sighted. If I can't even think of this, then all these years in Nine Heavens Palace have been wasted? Guyong snorted. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Then let's send a message to Feng Wenhai. After saying that, he took a few steps back with Zhao Tailai. Guyong activated the image crystal again. Wang. About 10 breaths of time passed. A phantom appeared. Who else could it be but Feng Wenhai? Old Zhao, get ready. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed as he thought to himself. Zhao Tailai nodded. He took out the image crystal and started recording. Old Gu, what's the matter? Feng Wenhai smiled. Guyong replied. It's nothing much. I just wanted to ask, have you found Jiang Haoyan's whereabouts? No. Feng Wenhai shook his head. Guyong sighed. I'm also investigating, but there's no news at all. It's as if he's evaporated into thin air. Don't worry. The entire northern region is under the control of our Nine Heavens Palace. We'll find him sooner or later. Feng Wenhai sneered. I know that too, but I can't help but worry. This Jiang Haotian is like an old fox. If he finds evidence of us framing him, won't we be finished? Gu Yong said worriedly. Feng Wenhai's expression changed drastically when he heard that. He said in a low voice, Old Gu, don't talk nonsense about this. Be careful not to be heard by others. Don't worry, I'm the only one here. Gu Yong said. That's good. Feng Wenhai heaved a sigh of relief. Gu Yong sighed. In order to frame him, we've planned for so long. We can't fail. He won't. The arrest warrant has been issued, and the Great Elder also believes it. Moreover, the people I sent to pretend to be his accomplices have been silenced. Where can he find evidence? This matter is already set in stone. Don't think too much about it. Feng Wenhai comforted. Silenced? Gu Yong murmured. Wenhai, tell me the truth. Will there be a day when you will silence me too? How is that possible? You're someone by father's side. Even if I had such thoughts, I wouldn't have the guts. Wait, what's wrong with you today? Why are you acting so strange? Feng Wenhai looked at Gu Yong suspiciously. Gu Yong sighed. It's all Jiang Haotian's fault. He's making me feel uneasy and uneasy. Feng Wenhai smiled in realization. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. All right, I'll continue to investigate. Gu Yong said. Feng Wenhai nodded, and then the phantom dissipated. Gu Yong exhaled and looked at Qin Feiyang. Is it okay now? Qin Feiyang turned to look at Zhao Tailai. Zhao Tailai nodded to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Gu Yong. It's okay. Gu Yong said. Then quickly fulfill your promise and remove your control over me. However, Qin Feiyang smiled without saying anything. Gu Yong's eyelids twitched, and he said angrily, You lied to me? Qin Feiyang said. I'm not a gentleman, so from the beginning, I never thought of letting you go. You're despicable. Gu Yong roared. Don't be agitated, let me finish. Although I wanted to kill you at first, what you said when you talked about Feng Yuan made me look at you in a different light. Qin Feiyang smiled. And then? Gu Yong frowned. Qin Feiyang said. I want you to abandon the dark and join the light. Abandon the dark and join the light? Gu Yong was slightly taken aback. You want me to join you? Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. I don't raise timid people here. I'm timid and afraid of death. Who wouldn't be afraid when encountering such a thing? Ask the person next to you. See if he's afraid. Gu Yong was a little unconvinced. Are you talking about me? Zhao Tailai asked expressionlessly. Yes. Gu Yong nodded. Zhao Tailai said resolutely. I will never betray the young master, even if I die. You make it sound nice, but that's because you haven't encountered it yet. Gu Yong sneered. You're wrong about that. We've gone through so many life and death situations together, but every time, he was by my side. The friendship between us is not something you can understand. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Gu Yong still had a look of disdain and asked, Since you're not joining you, then what do you mean by abandoning the dark and joining the light? Gongzi Feng. Qin Feiyang said. Gongzi Feng? Gu Yong was stunned, then his face changed. What do you mean? You want me to join Gongzi Feng? Could it be? Yes. Gongzi Feng and I have known each other for a long time, and he told me a lot of things about you. Qin Feiyang said. Gu Yong's face was dull. He really didn't expect Gongzi Feng to be with Jiang Haotian. Qin Feiyang said. You're smart and strong, so I want you to go to his side, help him plan and protect him. To put it bluntly, he's not qualified at all. Gu Yong sneered. Don't underestimate anyone, especially someone with Gongzi Feng's experience. Of course, if you refuse, I won't force you, but this will be your burial ground. Qin Feiyang smiled. You. Gu Yong glared at him and shouted. You're forcing me. I didn't say anything, I'm discussing with you. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Gu Yong sighed dispiritedly and said, All right, I'll listen to you. Very good. If he has any tricks, report to me immediately. Qin Feiyang said. Tricks? Gu Yong was stunned and frowned. You're not asking me to help him. You're asking me to monitor him. Helping and monitoring are the same. Qin Feiyang smiled. All right. But I'm already in this state. If I return to Nine Heavens Palace, Feng Yuan will definitely not let me go. Guyong said. I believe you'll have a way. As for the slave seal, when Feng Yuan dies in the future, I'll naturally help you remove it. Qin Feiyang smiled. You're really careless. When others see Feng Yuan, they can't wait to hide, yet you still want to kill him. Guyong said. So what if he's Feng Yuan? If he provokes me, even if he's the palace master of Nine Heavens Palace, I'll make him pay the price. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Guyong's mind buzzed. What kind of young man is this? His courage is so terrifying. Right. How long have you been following Feng Yuan? Qin Feiyang asked. Guyong thought for a moment and said, It should be more than 3,000 years. Qin Feiyang said, Then you should know a lot of secrets about Nine Heavens Palace, right? Secrets? Guyong was suspicious. Qin Batian. Qin Feiyang said word by word. What? Qin Batian. Guyong's gaze trembled, and there was deep fear in his eyes. You know? Qin Feiyang hurriedly asked. Of course I know. Not only me, everyone in the North region has heard of his name. It's just that too much time has passed, and people have gradually forgotten him. Guyong said. Qin Feiyang asked, Then where is he now? I don't know. Guyong shook his head. How can you not know? Haven't you heard Feng Yuan mention it? Qin Feiyang frowned. The name Qin Batian is a taboo in Nine Heavens Palace. No one dares to mention him, including Feng Yuan and the other big shots. Guyong said. Taboo, Qin Feiyang murmured. What did my ancestor do in Nine Heavens Palace? Why is everyone so afraid of him? Zhao Tailai comforted. Young master, don't worry, we'll find out sooner or later. Qin Feiyang nodded. You're investigating Qin Batian? Why do you want to investigate him? Is it his enemy? Or? Guyong heard Zhao Tailai's words and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Zhao Tailai shouted. Don't you know what you should ask and what you shouldn't ask? Guyong's pupils shrank, and he didn't speak again. Enough. While there's still time, go and settle down your wife. Qin Feiyang smiled. Yes, I have to settle down properly. Guyong sighed. He knew Feng Yuan too well. When he knew that he had betrayed them, he would definitely not let his family off. By the way, do you have any children? Qin Feiyang asked. No. But my old mother and father are still alive. They should be in a small tea house nearby, drinking tea and chatting with friends. Guyong said. Then go and settle them down quickly. In addition, you have to go and exchange for an image crystal. Qin Feiyang said. I know this. Guyong nodded. Okay. After saying that, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent Guyong out. Chapter 2021. Zhao Tailai frowned and said, Young master, are we really going to let him go? He's being controlled by the slave seal. He can't do anything. It's okay. Has the treasure pavilion auctioned any 9 yellow dragon pills these days? Qin Feiyang asked. Yes. Not only the treasure pavilion in Sky Dragon City, but the other pavilions in other cities are also crazily auctioning, causing quite a stir. Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, Are they soul stones or divine crystals? Divine crystals. However, I don't know how Mu Tianyang and Shengguan Qiu made the deal. Zhao Tailai said. My head hurts. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead. If it weren't for Mu Tianyang and Shengguan Qiu, it would be a large sum of soul stones. Young master, what is Mu Tianyang trying to do? Sometimes he's against us, sometimes he's nice to us? Zhao Tailai was suspicious. That's easy. He doesn't have the confidence to get rid of me. Otherwise he would have killed me. Qin Feiyang said. Zhao Tailai nodded and took out 2 iron boxes and an alchemy furnace from his Qiankuan bag. The alchemy furnace was the size of a wash basin. The lower half was green and the upper half was red. It was shining brightly and exuded a strong divine power. This furnace is called the Green Phoenix Furnace. It's a low-grade divine alchemy furnace. Don't blame us. After all, the divine crystals you gave us can only buy alchemy furnaces of this grade. As for the 2 iron boxes, they contain alchemy fire, Zhao Tailai said with a smile. Why would I blame you? I'm already very happy to get this alchemy furnace. Qin Feiyang smiled. He glanced at the azure luan cauldron and opened the 2 metal boxes. Waves of heat immediately surged out violently. The aura emitted was undoubtedly a 9th-grade alchemy fire. Zhao Tailai said with a smile, "We bought the alchemy fire and furnace from the Star River City branch." What do you mean? Qin Feiyang was curious. Didn't you ask us to investigate the background of Star River City's city lord? Tang Hai and I have discussed it. Since Shangguan Qiu doesn't want to sell, we'll go to Xinghe City. After arriving at the treasure pavilion in Celestial River City, Old Tang and I disguised ourselves a little and easily bought these alchemic flames and alchemical furnaces. Zhao Tailai smiled. Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up and asked with a smile, "Then did these branches ban us?" "We didn't go to the other branches, so we don't know. But it seems that the treasure pavilion of Star River City has also banned us," Zhao Tailai said. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. This Shangguan Qiu is really ruthless. I have to admit that this woman does have some skills. However, I'm very unhappy with her way of doing things. After all, there's a saying that goes, even if the transaction fails, the benevolence remains. Is it necessary to ban us? Zhao Tailai snorted through his nose. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while. Then his eyes flashed and he said, "We can't just sit and wait for death." "Young master, what do you mean?" Zhao Tailai was surprised. "You don't have to worry about this. I'll handle it. Let's go to the castle. We'll fuse the alchemic flames and start refining." Qin Feiyang smiled. "What about Feng Wenhai?" Zhao Tailai was stunned and asked. "We've got the evidence. There's no hurry. Let them continue to make trouble," Qin Feiyang said. Zhao Tailai smiled and said, "I understand. The higher you jump, the harder you fall." Qin Feiyang laughed and led Zhao Tailai into the castle. "Did you hear? There's a man called Jiang Haotian who is wanted by the 9th Heaven Palace. I've known about this for a long time. I heard that before entering the 9th Heaven Palace, this Jiang Haotian had been slandering the 9th Heaven Palace behind their backs and was found out. Then why didn't they punish him severely? This is the mercy of the 9th Heaven Palace. Not only did they not kill him, they even allowed him to enter the 9th Heaven Palace. But I didn't expect that after becoming a disciple of the 9th Heaven Palace, he still didn't change and continued to slander the 9th Heaven Palace behind their backs. Don't you think this kind of person is despicable?" "Despicable? He deserves to be killed." "Yeah. The big shots of the 9th Heaven Palace are not bad. It's fine if he doesn't repent, but he actually went from bad to worse? I've never seen such a shameless person before." Outside, not only in Sky Dragon City, the news had already spread in other cities and there were curses everywhere. Treasure chamber. Shangguan Qiu sat in the study room with an account book in his hand and looked at it carefully. Swoosh. Suddenly, a purple-robed youth appeared in the room out of thin air. Shangguan Qiu frowned slightly and looked up. When she saw the purple-robed youth's face, her brows relaxed and a smile appeared on her face. The purple-robed youth cupped his hands and smiled. "Steward Shangguan, it's been a few days. How have you been?" Shangguan Qiu smiled and said, "Thanks to you, I've been in a good mood these days." The purple-robed youth said, "So the batch of Juku yellow dragon pills that I gave you made a lot of money?" No. Brother Mu, you're wrong. It's not me who made money, it's the treasure chamber." Shangguan Qiu stood up and pointed to the tea table beside him and said, "Brother Mu, please take a seat." "No need." The purple-robed youth took out a qiankuan bag and threw it on the table saying, "There's a total of 10,000 pills here. It should be enough for the auction for a long time." Shangguan Qiu grabbed the qiankuan bag and checked it carefully. The smile on his face grew wider. "Don't just smile. The last batch of pills has been sold. Isn't it time to split the profits?" The purple-robed youth said. Yes. Shangguan Qiu came back to his senses and took out a qiankuan bag saying, "I've already prepared it." The purple-robed youth took the qiankuan bag and checked it for a while before putting it away. He looked at Shangguan Qiu and smiled saying, "Happy cooperation." "Happy cooperation." Shangguan Qiu smiled and asked curiously, By the way, what's your relationship with Jiang Haoyan? The purple-robed youth was stunned. He frowned and said, "Why do you ask?" This person was none other than Mu Qing. At first, when you came forward to stop me from cooperating with Jiang Haoyan, I thought you were old enemies. But 2 days ago, I received news that you seem to have an ambiguous relationship with Jiang Haoyan's elder sister and younger sister. Sheng Guanqiu said. Nonsense. Mu Qing could not help but get angry when he heard this. Is this nonsense? At that time after the assessment, many people saw it with their own eyes. Sheng Guanqiu said. Mu Qing did not bother to explain. He frowned and said, "Does this have anything to do with our cooperation?" No, I'm just curious. If I offended you in any way, please forgive me." Sheng Guanqiu quickly smiled apologetically. Mu Qing said, "Actually, you should thank me." What do you mean? Sheng Guanqiu was suspicious. If I didn't come forward, you would have cooperated with Jiang Haoyan. Now that Jiang Haoyan is wanted, your treasure school will definitely be affected. Mu Qing said. Sheng Guanqiu was stunned. He smiled and said, "That makes sense. Last question. Do you know where Jiang Haoyan is now, Brother Mu?" Mu Qing was surprised and asked suspiciously, "Why are you asking about him?" "No other reason. I'm just curious." Sheng Guanqiu smiled unnaturally. You can't always use the word curious as an excuse. Mu Qing's eyes became playful. Really? I don't think so. Sheng Guanqiu smiled embarrassedly. Miss, let me give you a piece of advice. If you're not from Ninth Heaven Palace, don't worry about them. More importantly, don't affect our cooperation. Mu Qing said meaningfully. Then, he opened an altar and left without looking back. Sheng Guanqiu stood alone in the study for a long time. Suddenly, a sigh was heard. A woman in purple walked out of the void. It was Sheng Guanfenglan. Sister. Sheng Guanqiu was not surprised at Sheng Guanfenglan's appearance. He had known about Sheng Guanfenglan for a long time. I wanted to use you to get some useful information from Mu Qing. I didn't expect him to see through me. Sheng Guanfenglan sighed. Sister, I'm useless. Sheng Guanqiu blamed himself. Sheng Guanfenglan smiled and said, Don't blame yourself. It's not that you're useless. These people are too smart. You don't have to worry about this. Otherwise, if you annoy him, it will really affect your cooperation. Okay. Sheng Guanqiu nodded. I'm puzzled. What kind of people are Jiang Haoyan, Mu Tianyang, and Mu Qing? Each one is more clever than the other. Sheng Guanfenglan was quite angry. After thinking for a while, she snorted and said, No, I have to meet Mu Tianyang in person. I don't believe that I, the leader of the law enforcement hall, can't defeat a mere disciple. Mu Tianyang may not know where Jiang Haoyan is, right? Sheng Guanqiu said. No. I have a feeling that he knows. Sheng Guanfenglan shook her head, opened an altar, and left. It's a mess. Sheng Guanqiu shook his head and sighed. He had stirred up a storm in Sky Dragon City. He was really a star of misfortune. Inside the ancient castle, Qin Feiyang had merged with his elixir fire. The Nether Devil Flame had also been promoted to the level of the inferior Divine Elixir Fire. Divine Elixir Fires and Divine Elixir Furnaces were also divided into inferior, medium, superior, supreme, peak, and legendary. It was the same level as a divine weapon. However, after merging with his elixir fire, Qin Feiyang did not immediately refine the spirit-breaking pill. This was because he had to familiarize himself with the new elixir furnace and elixir fire. After all, he only had one set of ingredients for the spirit-breaking pill. He could not afford to fail. And now, the elixir he was refining already had 9 elixir veins. He was only one step away from becoming a divine elixir. After an hour of familiarizing himself with the elixir, he could finally control the fire. After calming himself down for a while, Qin Feiyang took out the 9 Suns Thunderfire, Death Fruit, Ghost Wood, and Ghost Flower and placed them beside the elixir furnace. After that, he opened the elixir scripture and carefully read the steps of refining the spirit-breaking pill, as well as the fire required for each ingredient. After a while, after memorizing everything, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and activated the nether devil flame again, starting to refine the spirit-breaking pill. Everyone was cultivating in peace, including Zhao Tailai and Tang Hai. After knowing that Qin Feiyang had obtained a large number of soul stones, they no longer had any worries. They recklessly refined the soul stones and tried their best to break through to the god of war. Chapter 2022. The first ingredient was the departed spirit flower. 30% completion. Remove the impurities and extract the spirit liquid. During the extraction process, not only did he need to focus, but he also needed precise control. If the temperature inside the cauldron was a little higher or lower, the cauldron would be destroyed. The cauldron might even explode. Qin Feiyang didn't dare to be careless. And at this time he couldn't make any noise. Otherwise it would disturb his concentration. For ingredients like the departed spirit flower, extracting the spirit liquid would take a long time. Gradually, Qin Feiyang's forehead was covered in sweat. Seeing this, Fire Lotus took out a handkerchief and wanted to help Qin Feiyang wipe it off. But suddenly, the blood Kirin silently appeared beside her. It stopped Fire Lotus and said, "Don't touch him." What? Fire Lotus thought. Don't you know how to make pills? At this time the worst thing is to be disturbed. The blood Kirin thought. Fire Lotus heard this and cold sweat appeared on her back. You can just stand aside and watch, the blood Kirin said and then retreated. Fire Lotus quickly and quietly retreated to the blood Kirin's side. She asked, "Why are you awake?" "I was on the verge of a breakthrough, but I saw the young master making pills. I was afraid of disturbing him, so I didn't break through," the blood Kirin thought. Huo Yin nodded in realization. The blood Kirin asked suspiciously, "Don't you know anything about alchemy?" "I don't know." Fire Lotus shook her head. "You don't know? What do you mean?" The blood Kirin looked at her, confused. "My mind is blank. I don't even remember the god skills I used to have." Fire Lotus sighed. "Don't worry. When the young master makes the departed spirit breakthrough pill, you will definitely regain your memory." The blood Kirin smiled and comforted her. "I hope so." Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang again, her eyes full of anticipation. A moment later, wisps of faint medicinal fragrance floated out from within the Azure Phoenix cauldron. Rays of gray divine light also shot out from within the Azure Luan cauldron. Fire Lotus stood on her tiptoes and looked into the cauldron. She immediately saw a drop of gray spirit liquid floating within the cauldron. In addition to the medicinal fragrance, there was also a very strong evil aura. The departed spirit flower had already disappeared. "I didn't expect the first medicinal herb to take so long to refine," the blood Qilin mumbled. Could Qin Feiyang's spiritual power last until the end? Although Qin Feiyang's mind power had already reached a shocking level, this was still his first time refining a pill of this level. Therefore he couldn't help but worry. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang. His expression remained calm. After refining the spiritual medicine of the ghost flower, he did not rush to refine the next one. Instead, he slowly increased the heat. When the flame had stabilized at 55%, he gently waved his hand. A strand of mental energy appeared and swept the Yin spirit wood into the Azure Phoenix cauldron. This was because the Yin spirit wood required 55% of the flame. Qin Dage is really amazing. Although this is his first time refining the departed spirit barrier breaking pill, he did it without any hesitation or sluggishness. Fire Lotus's eyes were full of stars as she transmitted her voice. Of course. Otherwise, why would he be called a monster of alchemy? I think even the alchemy geniuses of Empyrean Palace might not be as good as him, the blood Qilin said proudly. Fire Lotus said in surprise, "You know him quite well." "Although I haven't been with him for long, I know all about his past deeds." The blood Qilin laughed inwardly. About half an hour passed. The Yin spirit wood and Reaper fruit spirit liquid had been refined one after another. Actually, refining the spirit liquid was nothing for Qin Feiyang. The most important step was the next step. The departed spirit flower, Yin spirit wood, and Reaper fruit were all items of extreme Yin and evil. Therefore, the spirit liquid that was refined also contained an evil aura that was difficult to erase. If he wanted to refine the departed spirit barrier breaking pill, he had to completely dispel the evil aura. This required the 9 Suns Lightning Fire. The 9 Suns Lightning Fire was an item of extreme yang, and could be considered the nemesis of items of extreme yin. The next step was to fuse the 9 Suns Lightning Fire with the 3 drops of spirit liquid to dispel the evil aura. Qin Feiyang had never experienced this method of refining pills before. Although items of extreme yang were the nemesis of items of extreme yin, they were also incompatible with each other. The fusion of these two auras would inevitably cause a collision. If there was a collision, there was a possibility of failure. Therefore, his energy had entered a state that he had never been in before. He was highly focused and forgot everything. In other words, at this moment, there was nothing in his mind other than alchemy. A wave of mind power emerged from the top of his head and wrapped around the 9 Suns Lightning Fire, sealing all of its aura. Then he used his mind power to control the 9 Suns Lightning Fire and slowly entered the Azure Phoenix Cauldron. At the same time, the 3 drops of spirit liquid in the pill furnace were also enveloped by mind power, completely sealing off the evil aura. This was done to prevent the 2 auras from colliding. Because, if he did not seal these 2 auras, the moment the 9 Suns Lightning Fire entered the pill furnace, it would probably riot. On the contrary, if he sealed these 2 auras, they would not be able to collide. Finally, the 9 Suns Lightning Fire entered the pill furnace. Qin Feiyang had to control the temperature of the fire, control the 9 Suns Lightning Fire, and the 3 drops of spirit liquid, and seal their auras. It could be said that he was doing 3 things at once. In less than an instant, beads of sweat flowed down his forehead like rain. The blood Qilin said to himself, "Let's retreat a little more to prevent the furnace from exploding." If the divine level pill furnace exploded, even a divine beast that was about to step into the realm of War God would be seriously injured. The Fire Lotus nodded. As the blood Qilin retreated, he also secretly woke up the white-eyed wolf, the mermaid princess, and the others. Everyone opened their eyes at the first moment, and quietly retreated to the back corner, looking nervously at Qin Feiyang. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's mind stirred, and the mind power that wrapped around the 3 drops of spirit liquid and the 9 Suns Lightning Fire slightly loosened. Immediately, a wisp of extreme yang qi and a wisp of extreme yin qi appeared and filled the pill furnace. However, whether it was the extreme yang qi or the extreme yin qi, they were both very weak and could not even be felt. Qin Feiyang did not dare to completely remove the seal. Otherwise, the 2 auras would rush out at the same time and collide with each other, causing the furnace to explode. On the contrary, just like now, by unlocking the seal bit by bit, allowing the 2 auras to slowly meet and gradually devour the evil aura, it would greatly reduce the risk. Taking a step back, even if the 2 auras collided, it would be under control, and the furnace would not explode. Time passed quietly. The entire castle was dead silent at this moment. The 2 auras occupied one side of the pill furnace, and did not pounce on each other for a long time. It was as if they minded their own business. This gave Qin Feiyang a headache. One was extreme yin, the other was extreme yang, and they were playing peacefully? What kind of joke was this? However, Qin Feiyang was not in a hurry and waited quietly. About a few hundred breaths passed. Finally, the extreme yang qi emitted by the heavenly thunder flame began to slowly surge towards the extreme yin qi. The extreme yin qi seemed to have also sensed the provocation and threat, and was unwilling to be outdone as it surged towards the extreme yang qi. The 2 auras finally met. Qin Feiyang could clearly sense that the aura in the pill furnace had become chaotic. As soon as the 2 auras met, a scene of you chasing after me appeared, both wanting to devour the other. But in the end, it was still the extreme yang qi that steadily gained the upper hand and obliterated the evil yin qi. The chaotic aura also stabilized. It works. Fire Lotus's spirit was lifted. There was definitely no problem. Qin Feiyang also heaved a sigh of relief. After the previous fusion, he had already grasped the propriety, and began to gradually increase the release of the seal on the 9 Suns Thunder Fire, and the 3 drops of spiritual liquid. The two auras met again. The aura in the pill furnace became chaotic again, as if it would explode at any time. This process was even longer than refining the spiritual liquid. It wasn't until an hour later that the evil yin qi was completely expelled. Qin Feiyang made a prompt decision, and began to fuse the 9 suns thunder fire, and the 3 drops of spiritual liquid. The next step was simple for him. After the fusion, it solidified into a pill. About a moment later, under everyone's expectant gaze, a purple pill took shape and flew out of the pill furnace. At the same time, a strong medicinal fragrance, like a tide, instantly flooded the entire ancient castle. Qin Feiyang finally heaved a sigh of relief, and following that, a sense of dizziness welled up in his heart. Seeing that he was about to fall, the mermaid princess hurriedly stepped forward and supported Qin Feiyang, calling out, "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus's expression also changed, and she anxiously ran to Qin Feiyang's side, her eyes full of concern. "It's okay. It's just that my nerves were too tense, and my energy was too focused for too long. Now that I've relaxed, I can't recover." Qin Feiyang shook his head hard and waved his hand with a smile. Hearing this, everyone's anxious hearts finally relaxed. Then, everyone raised their heads and looked at the undead barrier-breaking pill floating above the pill furnace. The pill was perfectly round, and the purple light was dazzling. The aura it emitted was also very pure yang qi, and not a single trace of evil yin qi could be felt. On the surface of the pill, there were even traces of electric arcs. The blood Kirin turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked with concern, "Young master, how much power do you have left?" Qin Feiyang froze and asked suspiciously, "Are you worried that my power will run out?" The blood Kirin nodded. "How is that possible? During the last test, my power was over level 50. It must be higher now." Qin Feiyang smiled. "That's good." The blood Kirin nodded. Qin Feiyang turned and looked at Fire Lotus. He smiled and said, "Girl, are you ready?" "Yes, this is not a child's play." When the inner demons went through the test, it was, Zhao Tailai said. Ahem. Before Zhao Tailai could finish, Tang Hai coughed and interrupted him. Then he pointed at Qin Feiyang. Zhao Tailai's face changed and he quickly said, "I'm sorry, young master. I didn't mean to mention the inner demons." "Why are you so nervous? The inner demons are our friends. When you mention them, it's normal to think of them. I was worried that you would forget about them." Qin Feiyang smiled. "No matter who we forget, we won't forget him. We were just worried that we would bring up the past and make you sad," Zhao Tailai said. Chapter 2023. Am I really that weak? It's all in the past, it's fine. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Fire Lotus again. "I'm ready." Huolian took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang. Her eyes shone with a resolute light. "Good. You guys continue to cultivate. I'll take Fire Lotus to the Black Tortoise world to undergo the tribulation." Qin Feiyang instructed everyone before grabbing the undead barrier-breaking pill and bringing Fire Lotus to the depths of the desert. After all, there were many living beings in the Black Tortoise world. If they underwent the tribulation elsewhere, they would definitely hurt the innocent. Most importantly, it would cause a commotion. And there was nothing in the desert except for storms. As for ferocious beasts, there were only a few in the depths of the desert. "Take it." Qin Feiyang handed the undead barrier-breaking pill to Fire Lotus. Fire Lotus took the pill, looked at the sky, gritted her teeth, and threw it into her mouth. Wait. But at this moment, a slightly childish voice sounded. Qin Feiyang were stunned. They raised their heads and looked over. They saw a little boy wearing a small dudu standing in the air above them. His little face was filled with seriousness. "It's you?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. The little boy ignored him and looked at Fire Lotus. "You can't undergo the tribulation." "Why?" Qin Feiyang frowned. "Do you know how terrifying the undead tribulation is? The undead are dead. To be reborn is to go against the heavens and change their fate. And this kind of heaven-defying action will be obliterated," the little boy said. Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "How does it compare to the inner demon's tribulation?" The little boy said, It's even more terrifying than the inner demon's tribulation. It's even more terrifying. Qin Feiyang was stunned. The little boy said in a low voice, I can guarantee that she won't succeed. In the end, her soul will be destroyed, and she won't even have the chance to reincarnate. Fire Lotus lowered her head and looked at the undead barrier-breaking pill in her hand, her eyes flickering. Trust me, living an ordinary life like this is better than having one's soul destroyed. The little boy looked at the Fire Lotus and said. Fire Lotus took a deep breath and raised her head to look at the little boy. Thank you. However, instead of living like this without knowing what my surname is, I might as well fight to the death. Are you sure? The little boy raised his eyebrows. Fire Lotus nodded and put the undead barrier-breaking pill into her mouth without hesitation. As soon as the undead barrier-breaking pill melted, Fire Lotus couldn't help but hug her head and cry out in pain. Because she was an undead, she was also full of yin energy, so she was also very afraid of this kind of yang energy. Usually, as long as there was no direct contact, it would be fine. But now, the 9 Suns Thunderfire had been refined into a pill. After Fire Lotus consumed the pill, it meant that the 9 Suns Thunderfire's yang qi was now in her body. She felt as if there was a raging fire in her body that wanted to incinerate her body. Sigh. The little boy shook his head and sighed. I really have to hand it to you people. It's not good to live, but you insist on courting death. Finished. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said in a deep voice, Brat, let me tell you, you can't use the origin energy of the Black Tortoise realm to help her block the heavenly tribulation. Why? Qin Feiyang frowned. The Black Tortoise realm is just a small world that has just been born. It is still very weak and does not have much origin energy. It cannot withstand such torment. After the little boy finished speaking, he did not give Qin Feiyang a chance to ask any questions and instantly disappeared without a trace. Weak. Qin Feiyang looked around, his face full of suspicion. All along, the Black Tortoise realm had always been very strong. How could it be weak? Boom. Suddenly, an ear-deafening rumble sounded in the sky. The sky above the desert was suddenly shrouded by clouds of fire, and a terrifying heavenly might descended. Qin Feiyang hurriedly came back to his senses and retreated, then paid attention to Fire Lotus. Although Fire Lotus's expression was pained after consuming the undead barrier-breaking pill, her determined gaze remained the same. Crack. The heavenly tribulation brewed for a moment before finally descending from the sky. It was a fiery red thunderbolt that exuded a terrifying yang qi. Compared to it, the yang qi of the 9 Suns lightning fire was like a firefly compared to the sun. Not worth mentioning at all. Naturally, the yang qi emitted by the lightning power was even more threatening to Fire Lotus. However, she did not dodge and stood in the void, waiting for the heavenly tribulation to descend. There was a loud bang. The lightning power descended and landed on Fire Lotus's body. The expression on Fire Lotus's face instantly shattered, and her entire body smashed into the desert below like a meteorite. But the lightning power did not dissipate, and chased after Fire Lotus and drowned her on the spot. Fire Lotus wailed in pain. The lightning power turned into flames that not only enveloped her, but also stuck to her skin. No matter what she did, she could not extinguish the flames, as if they were maggots attached to her bones. Her clothes also melted. Even her skin was melting. It is indeed more terrifying than the inner demon's heavenly tribulation. Qin Feiyang muttered. Back then, when the inner demons underwent their heavenly tribulation, although it was also very terrifying, he managed to withstand it. But now, it was only the first lightning tribulation, and Fire Lotus's situation was very bad. Before the first lightning power dissipated, the second, third, and fourth lightnings struck one after another, not giving Fire Lotus any chance to breathe. Under the heavenly might, Fire Lotus could not resist at all, and could only be struck. Crack! When the 10th lightning power descended, Fire Lotus's body could no longer withstand it, and was torn apart. However, she was not killed, and returned to her previous undead form, turning into a gray fog. In other words, she was beaten back to her original form. But even if she was beaten back to her original form, The sea of fire formed by the lightning power was burning Fire Lotus crazily. Qin Feiyang could no longer see Fire Lotus's painful expression, and could only hear the endless screams. This made him very anxious. In fact, he knew that the most terrifying thing was not the heavenly tribulation, but the extreme yang energy in the heavenly tribulation. This thing was extremely harmful to Fire Lotus. Wait. Extreme yang qi was the nemesis of yin and evil things. What would happen if it was a living person? A living person should not be afraid of this extreme yang energy, right? At this thought, he looked up at the tribulation clouds in the sky, and a hint of madness flashed in his eyes. The last time he used the inner demon's heavenly tribulation, the strength of his body had been greatly improved. And now, the opportunity had come again. How could he miss it? Boom. Another thunderbolt struck down. Qin Feiyang didn't hesitate any longer. With a leap, he rushed to the top of the Fire Lotus. Qin Dage, what are you doing? Fire Lotus's anxious voice immediately sounded. I can help you pass the tribulation, and at the same time, I can temper my body. Why not? Qin Feiyang laughed heartily as he faced the thunderbolt. The lightning power suddenly blasted on his body. With a loud bang, Qin Feiyang's body was immediately covered in blood, and he was smashed into the desert below. Qin Dage, Fire Lotus exclaimed. Whoosh. Qin Feiyang rushed out of the yellow sand, wrapped in flames. The flames formed by the lightning power were no threat to his body at all. But looking at the sky, the corners of his mouth pursed into a bitter smile. When he faced it personally, he realized that he had underestimated the heavenly tribulation. Although the yang qi was useless to him, the destructive power of the heavenly tribulation was not something he could withstand. Crack. Another thunderbolt struck down. Fire Lotus shouted. Qin Dage, don't take the risk for me, I'll do it myself. You call me big brother, how can I not help you? Qin Feiyang smiled and activated the battle formula. He rushed into the sky and faced the lightning power. Boom. This time, he withstood it. After all, the blood-red armor could block 90% of the attacks. And under the bombardment of the lightning power, only a few cracks appeared on the armor. Taking this opportunity, Qin Feiyang hurriedly absorbed the lightning power and tempered his body. Crack. The heavenly tribulation fell one after another, bombarding Qin Feiyang's body. The blood-red armor was indeed terrifying, and it withstood more than 10 lightning bolts. But after the blood-red armor was broken, Qin Feiyang was blasted into the desert again. His skin and flesh were torn open, and blood splattered everywhere. Enough. It's really enough. Fire Lotus was so anxious that she was about to cry. Whoosh. Qin Feiyang flew into the sky and stood in front of Fire Lotus, looking like a man covered in blood. He smiled and said, I'm fine. After saying that, he faced the next lightning bolt. Qin Dage, looking at the figure that rushed into the sky without hesitation and risked his life to protect her, Fire Lotus cried. They were not related, but just because she called him big brother, he loved her so much, took care of her, and even risked his life for her. Although she was an undead, she also had feelings. How could she not be moved? And this back view would forever be branded in her soul. Boom. Qin Feiyang relied on his strong willpower, and finally made it to the 50th lightning bolt. Is it the same as the inner demon's tribulation, with 99 lightning bolts? After getting up from the desert, Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel despair. Fire Lotus's tribulation was not only more powerful than the inner demon's tribulation, but it was also much faster. He didn't even have a chance to breathe. What should he do? If this continued, not only would he not be able to help Fire Lotus, but he would also die here. Wait. Isn't there still a legendary divine artifact? Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's spirit was lifted, and he rushed toward the lightning bolts while saying to himself, Great-grandmother, give me the divine pagoda. Inside the ancient castle, Tantai Li heard this and immediately took out the divine pagoda. Qin Feiyang's mind moved, and the divine pagoda appeared, and 3 types of divine power poured into the divine pagoda. Clang. The divine pagoda immediately woke up and faced the tribulation. Boom. The divine pagoda was blasted away, and more than a dozen cracks appeared on it. But even so, Qin Feiyang was still very happy. because at least he had time to rest. While controlling the divine pagoda to resist the heavenly tribulation, he took out a large number of healing pills and stuffed them into his mouth. These healing pills were all concocted just before he concocted the undead barrier-breaking pill. Therefore, each healing pill had 9 veins, and the energy it contained was extremely huge. Moreover, his bloodline power also had an extremely strong healing ability, and he had even fused with the fire of life back then. Therefore, his injuries were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Moreover, he also took out a few thousand divine crystals, crushed them all with a wave of his hand, and then swallowed them into his stomach to replenish the divine power he had consumed. In the ancient world, divine crystals were not only a currency, but they could also replenish divine power. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.